Okay, cross-examination by Mr. Poe, then redirect by Ms. Mercado, then on to the next topic. Mr. Poe.
Good afternoon to all. Jose Poe for ICSE. My question is to Mr. Figueroa. Mr. Figueroa, you testified that one of the justifications for changing, let's call it the current oversight model, was that there were, and I am paraphrasing, delays in execution or execution risks associated with having to request approval from the Bureau due to Bureau established constraints. So my question is, does Luma have an estimate or percentage of its performance shortfalls that can be attributed specifically to the hurdle of seeking PREP approval?
So I believe my statement was that to ask, it was in response to a question of the impact of the process, and I responded that there had been some occasions where the teams responsible for executing the budget were unable to perform those that work or incur those expenditures because it was all pending the Bureau's final determination. But to your specific question on have I quantified that or do you have a specific number of the impact? No, I don't.
So is the scope of these delays significant, let's say, to public safety or in any measurable way? Or, for example, sorry for, not only significant to public safety, but also with regards to reliability of the grid, for example.
I think so. I think that's the case because you can't have a situation.
Sorry to interrupt. There seems to be some feedback from the feed that we couldn't hear before. I don't know if it would interfere with the testimony.
And while we're dealing with that, we're also short a microphone. I just borrowed this from council down there because we didn't get one.
All right. My question was, is the scope of these delays significant enough to affect public safety or reliability in any significant and measurable way?
Short and concise, the answer is potentially yes.
Can it be measured? Has it been measured by Luma?
I don't believe it has been measured in a way that that we can present to you, but there are a simple example is there's an equipment that breaks down that has that impacts the reliability of a certain number of customers. If we're unable to perform that work until an approval is received, then that work will not get performed until the approvals are granted, which means that there is work that we could have done immediately, which potentially would not get done until the process is completed.
All right. So these execution delays, have they resulted, for example, in delays of obligating federal funds, for example, or are you speaking broadly only about non-federal capital expenditures?
These are only related to operation and maintenance and non-federally funded capital expenditures.
So would you agree that the cost of having the oversight model that we have currently outweigh the benefits of what you're proposing in terms of execution only, which has been what I'm bringing up in my line of questioning?
I certainly believe that customers at the end of the day would benefit more if the utility has the flexibility to execute work when necessary, as opposed to any work that's needed to respond to customer needs being delayed for whatever reasons.
Sorry for making the question again, right?
I am not aware that's been quantified. Yeah, I don't have a number, quantitative analysis that I can provide to you on that.
That will be all.
Redirect Ms. Mercado.
Before that, I had a couple of follow-up questions from some new topics that the commissioners asked about. Very short.
Go ahead.
These will be for Mr. Smith. For the record, Corey Brady, Weil Gotchel, and Manges speaking on behalf of the bondholder interveners. Mr. Smith, do you recall earlier Commissioner Torres asked you about whether LUMA has generally hit its annual budgets?
Yes.
And you said that it always had hit its annual budgets, right? Okay, but looking at the quarterly reports that LUMA submits to PREB, you have not actually always hit those quarterly budget reports, have you?
That's correct. Variability from quarter to quarter can be greater than an annual variance.
In fact, in fiscal year 2022, in the first half of that year, there were some significant overages in the 30% range, right?
I'd have to check the 30% that you're citing, but yes, there are from quarter to quarter can be significant variances to budget.
Okay, and do you also recall being asked about how mainland IOUs or investor-owned utilities would deal with outage costs?
Yes.
And you mentioned that mainland IOUs would typically securitize such outage costs, right?
Securitize them with the caveat that the cost has to be large enough that there's a bond market appetite for the financing. And jurisdictions also typically require legislation at the state level to allow or facilitate a securitization. But that, if those conditions exist, it is typically the lowest cost way to finance and pay for storm cost restoration.
And as you mentioned, LUMA has incurred approximately $320 million in outage event costs since taking over, right?
In total, before accounting for approximately $87 million that was funded by the OMA mandated storm reserve.
Okay, so if PREPA had access to the capital markets, then you would have potentially been able to securitize that amount and spread the cost over 20 to 30 years, right?
Potentially with the prerequisites that I mentioned earlier being in place to facilitate a securitization.
But instead, you have had to incur those amounts and are now seeking to recoup them from ratepayers essentially all at once, right?
Not all at once. There was the petition, I believe, collected over 2 years, but absent access to capital markets, ratepayer funds is the only source of funding for any of the operators to fund their operations.
Right, so 2 years instead of 20 to 30.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
I have a question. This is Commissioner Ramos. Regarding the 300-something million that you specified had been incurred because of outage events, could you maybe state a percentage of how much of that money could be recovered through FEMA reimbursements?
Right. So the amounts in that amount that we've discussed, it's actually $317 million. I can give you the exact number. The cost related to some of the Fiona damage would in fact potentially be FEMA reimbursable. It's approximately $69 million of that amount would be FEMA reimbursable. The way that we think about that is FEMA funds are slower than an funded outage reserve account, for example. So when we think about the source of funding to pay for those outage restorations, the first source is the outage event account. However, we would then go pursue FEMA reimbursement for that. If FEMA reimbursement is achieved for that, then that reimbursement would go back into the outage account.
Thank you.
I have a question as well.
Yeah,
And I'm sorry to go back on the 209 million that you're requesting the ratepayers, but I still don't understand why we need to request the ratepayers 209 million, and I need to be clear. I know you said you had the budget and you use the budget, 100% of the budget. I assume you do the projects that we approved for in that budget, but you had the reserve account that had 30 million. And if you have it, and that's separate from the budget. So you could spend that 30 million in outage events accounts. So you spend the 30 million in outage events accounts, PREPA would fill the budget, fill that account again, and you kept on spending money for outage events, valid outage events. How much, because what I don't understand is if you spent that money that PREPA put in, because that money is ratepayers' money as well, is 209 that you overspent and you owe suppliers? Or, and that's why you want the ratepayers to pay for it, because you overspent 209 of what PREPA gave you, or what is that 209 million?
So look, if you give me a little bit of latitude to try to answer your question and explain. I think what may be somewhat complicating this issue is we're talking about the outage event cost since inception, right? So over 4+ years now. The funding of those outage events has changed over time, right? If we go back to inception, there was $30 million placed in the outage event account, along with establishing the other accounts in the OMA. As LUMA incurred outage event cost, it submitted those documents to PREPA, and then PREPA, authorized release of all of the $30 million to reimburse those outage costs.
Okay, so you have to ask PREPA for permission to use money of that outage event account?
That is correct. And I think that's a very important question. All of the funds that accrue into the PREPA bank accounts are ratepayer funds. They're not LUMA bank accounts, and so LUMA does not move a dollar without a PREPA directive to do so from a bank account.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right that we would petition to PREPA and say, these are the outage costs we incurred. They would agree or disagree, as the case may be, but they have funded or authorized use of those $30 million in the outage account. So fast forwarding through time, that account was replenished 2 other times. Right. And those funds were then ultimately dispersed to LUMA to pay for outage event costs. Okay.
30 million and 30 million?
That's 30 at inception,
Mhm.
replenished once with 30, and then replenished again with 30. Ultimately, it was about $87 million out of those 3, that $90 million that was authorized for LUMA to use to pay for outage cost. Right? There's additional cost on top of that. How are they paid for? And this is why I'm talking through the cycle of time, right? If you go back to, say 2 years ago, right, 3 years ago, the construct under the OMA is that accounts are funded with various amounts of funding. So in the operating account, for example, it's 4.5 times LUMA's monthly budget. Okay. That's different than the outage event account, which has a prescribed $30 million, right? The NFC and the operating account budget are functions of the LUMA NFC and operating budget. That was designed because with PREPA in Title III, that's the only cash that LUMA has to operate with. Okay. In setting aside outage accounts, right, our costs are not 1/12 of our budget each month. Right. So, for example, in April, we make a very large property and boiler insurance payment. Right. It's about $7 million. That's not, that's not a 1/12 of that cost. And so the concept is there's additional liquidity or cash in those accounts that allows LUMA to manage those variabilities in the way that its costs come in. Said another way, revenues change over time, right? We have peak load in the summer months. We have de minimis lower load in February, March. So the cash that comes to them is not 1/12 each month. So the idea was that there was a cash cushion in the accounts that allowed floating through those variabilities. Okay. You go back 2 years ago when those accounts were being funded, it's 2/3 of their required funding. There was liquidity to manage through these things. You go to 18 months ago, that liquidity evaporated. Right? So if going back in time, it was more there was cash to fund outage event activities. Go back 12 months ago, 14 months ago, 6 months ago, 3 months ago, there was not cash there. So 2 things have happened, right? One is LUMA has had to reduce other activities, right, to go deal with those outage events. More importantly, and it's one of the things we haven't talked about here, is the distinction between a budget and cash. Okay, and where I say that's very important is we sit here today, we owe vendors as of last Monday, $229 million. Okay, why do we owe vendors $229 million? It's because we as a utility have elected to continue to do work, right? per our budget and per the needs of our customers, but we haven't had the cash to pay vendors for that. And that's been a very involved process in managing that, right? But so one of the things that we would see, for example, is that we owe money to vegetation vendors, right? Some of that vegetation work that was done and some of the work those crews did would have been for outage response, right? So we owe a vendor money for work that they did to respond to an outage, but we don't have the full amount of cash to pay them. Right. So I know that was a long-winded, complicated explanation, but as we moved through time, the way those outage costs have been funded has changed as the funding in I call it the utility complex, right? As the funding in that complex has changed, LUMA has had to respond to that differently. Right. And so like right now, a lot of those costs are just being borne by our vendors. Unfortunately, we're using our vendors as a source of working capital.
So
because of the funding we have.
So, Mr. Smith, just to get to the bottom line, because we must move on to make it through the agenda today, the 209 million does not represent what you would consider overspending. It represents a need for cash that was in excess of what lay in the outage reserve account. Correct?
Said correctly, yes.
And that the consequences of having the insufficiency in the outage reserve account were twofold by your description. Not twofold. One is other activities that you otherwise would have spent money on had to be deferred to free up the cash to pay for the outage.
Right.
And the second is what you just got finished saying is some vendors that normally would have gotten paid with cash if that cash were available have not yet been paid.
Correct.
Yet. Okay. All right.
I want to clarify something.
I'm really
first.
trying to move on, sir. Go right ahead. Make it fast.
No, the only thing is that we do fund the replenish of the operating accounts per the OMA, but we don't have visibility on what they spend those funds.
Trust me, I know all about that from the other case that we've been through, and this is not the time to debate that. Nobody is sitting here today accusing you of doing anything. We're just trying to find out what's going on with the 209 million. Ms. Mercado.
Before we move on,
There's always something before I move on. Go ahead, Ms. Valle.
I just want to make sure that PREPA is given an opportunity to clarify any point because Mr. Smith
It's not.
mentioned PREPA on some topics, and because that information is on the record, I just want to make sure that since PREPA is here available to clarify anything
Well, Ms.
on that topic, is being afforded the opportunity
Right.
for
Can we
for
just
the record to be clear on this topic.
Clarify
One
thing, I
second.
think.
I'll decide who talks when, including when I talk. Okay. We are not going to debate here today who has complied with what in the OMA. It is not relevant to this panel or to this matter. Now, Ms. Mercado, ask your redirect questions, and we'll see what time is left at 5 o'clock. Ms. Mercado.
Margarita Mercado Chagaray for Luma. I will begin with Alejandro Figueroa. When you're ready. So throughout the day, there have been many words used to describe Luma's proposals. The word flexibility, budget amendments, and reallocation of expenditures within approved budgets, those terms have been used. And I would like you to briefly explain Luma's proposal to amend the Energy Bureau requirements regarding pre-approval by the Energy Bureau on budget amendments so that the record is clear.
So, stated briefly, what Luma is proposing is for the Bureau to adopt a annual budget through a proceeding or the proceeding that it chooses, and to provide and to establish that any amendments to that budget would be allowed Luma to perform those amendments as long as they are within a 5% band of each of the operating non-federally funded capital and federally funded capital budgets, and that it revert its prior rulings that approvals at a line item level of the budget are required prior to that amendment being performed.
Could you explain the proposal that the 5% threshold to require approval by the Energy Bureau? Where is that proposal come from?
The 5% for the Energy Bureau, I believe, it stems from various orders they have issued in their initial budgets proceeding, while the approval of an annual budget stems from their 2017 rate order.
Does the 2017 rate order establish the thresholds pursuant to which PREPA or LUMA would have to come into the Energy Bureau and request a budget amendment?
It is my understanding that it was not.
With its proposal, is LUMA seeking flexibility or pre-authorization to overspend with regards to an approved budget?
No.
In your testimony earlier today, you also mentioned an interest in aligning the budget amendment process by the Energy Bureau with the OMA. Could you explain why you're proposing to align the T&D OMA with the Energy Bureau budget amendment process?
So while I understand that the Bureau is not a party to the OMA and is not bound by the provisions of the OMA themselves, the OMA is the contractual document and legal document that establishes the relationship between LUMA, PREPA, and the Puerto Rico, the P3A. And therefore, it is my belief that to the extent that the Energy Bureau recognizes that its regulatory authority exercised in tandem with the structures and the construct that's agreed to under the OMA, then many of the issues that have been raised throughout this hearing today with regards to how does the P3A's role and the PREP's role overlap would be resolved, because at the end of the day they would be basing themselves from the same starting point. So I believe it's important that the Bureau exercises its authority, recognizing that the OMA exists and that there are roles, responsibilities, and obligations that emanate from that document.
Have you ever thought about seeking an amendment to the OMA?
That's beyond my scope.
That's not the question I asked. I said, have you ever thought about it?
I have no need to thought about it because I don't have any discretion to seek an amendment.
Who does, Mr. Saka?
I believe it's beyond LUMA itself, and it's an issue that has to deal with the LUMA's parent companies.
Oh. So have you ever inquired of the parent companies whether they'd be interested in seeking an amendment to the OMA? You as the regulatory director here?
I have not.
Okay, next question, please.
And from your experience as Chief Regulatory Officer for LUMA, are there any benefits to customers if LUMA is granted more flexibility in terms of spending after the Energy Bureau approves a budget per fiscal year?
I think he's already testified to that in numerous ways this morning, haven't you? Is there anything else to add to what you said this morning?
What I would say is that I believe that there are benefits to the customers that derive from that flexibility.
All right, next question.
And there was an example or questions posed this morning about whether LUMA could reallocate funding for vegetation management to, for example, labor costs. Do you remember that question? I think it was early in the morning. But could there also be a scenario where LUMA would need more money for vegetation management throughout the year, and then the flexibility to reallocate to vegetation management would be needed?
Yes, absolutely. I think the flexibility would work both ways, both to reduce potentially a line item that the Bureau might consider as the highest priority, but also would allow us to move money towards line items that the Bureau considers high priority. So I don't think it's a tool to overrule or somehow implement a budget in a manner that's inconsistent with the Bureau's authority. I think it's a tool for purpose of executing on a day-to-day basis, but always within the bounds of the general guidelines and directives that the Bureau should establish when it issues an order approving an annual budget.
If the Energy Bureau agrees with LUMA and alters the current framework for pre-approvals of budget amendments or budget reallocations, what is your LUMA's positions regarding the oversight role that the Energy Bureau would retain regarding LUMA's spending?
So, for example, the Bureau might determine that there's a particular interest in investing in certain types of work or certain types of programs. Through our different quarterly reports, whether those are the quarterly reports on the budget or quarterly reports on performance metrics, either legacy metrics or the Annex 9 metrics, the Bureau would have the tools to assess how progress is being made, whether achievements are being produced or there's been movement towards a goal that's been established by the Bureau, and at any point in time they can open a proceeding to oversee whether there is something that is inconsistent. They can issue orders directing us to change a particular priority that we may have that's obvious coming from that reporting. So throughout the year, they retain the visibility and the ability to correct, if that's an appropriate term, to correct the execution of a budget by LUMA if they deem that it deviates from what they believe is a priority objective.
But that would always occur only after the fact of the spending, correct?
Not necessarily.
Oh, how would it occur before the fact of the spending?
Because in my example, I am not talking about incurring an expenditure that you disagree with. I am talking about whether monies are being allocated to the same priorities that you believe or the Bureau believes are. So in my example,
I got it.
You have been
it's an allocation.
prevented and a potentially inconsistent expenditure with your objectives.
Next.
You mentioned at least two areas where the Energy Bureau can exercise oversight in your answer regarding performance metrics and the quarterly reports, which I understood you to mean quarterly reports on spending. Am I correct?
In the initial budgets, yes.
Initial
spending.
budgets. Are there any other Energy Bureau dockets whether the Energy Bureau also oversees spending by LUMA in operational areas?
Out of the top of my head, that we do a lot of reporting on projects. We submit PREP-approved investments. We submit projects on that forecast both federally funded and non-federally funded projects.
You ready to go?
So there are multiple case proceedings or dockets in which we submit information that the Bureau could use to assess performance and take whatever remedial actions they deem are appropriate.
My last question to you. Throughout the day, there was also mention of imprudent costs and whether the Energy Bureau could exercise authority to deny a cost based on that is imprudently incurred. And I think mismanagement was also discussed as a grounds to deny an incurred cost. Per your knowledge, up until today, has the Energy Bureau issued any determination that any costs incurred by LUMA have been imprudent?
I am not aware of any determination by the PREP with regards to any of LUMA's operation and federally and non-federally funded capital projects or investments in those areas have been considered or determined to be imprudent.
Thank you. I just have a few questions to Mr. Smith. Earlier this morning, you also provided testimony regarding the impact of these Energy Bureau requirements to pre-approve reallocations of expenditures or amendment of budgets. Could you explain from your vantage point of as LUMA's Chief Financial Officer what the impact of these Energy Bureau requirements has on the operations at LUMA?
So I would say there are two impacts on it. One is, and this is the most critical, is that work might not proceed as quickly as it otherwise would. I think Mr. Figueroa mentioned 30 to 45 days frequently to go through the amendment process with the PREB. If LUMA holds that work, that's 4 to 6 weeks that passes before the work is addressed. There are some instances where, because it's been something that impacts customers with customer outages, LUMA just moves to do the work anyway, and then essentially comes to the PREB after the fact. But by definition, that puts LUMA in a position of essentially not requesting that reallocation because it's responding to an immediate customer need.
Could you illustrate a bit more about how this plays out? For example, you have someone from operations. Mr. Pedro Melendez and Kevin Burgermeister have testified here about the work that they do. If they come to you and say, I have this emergent work that needs performance and it's not budgeted as approved exactly by the Energy Bureau, how does that conversation develop and in terms between them and the finance department?
So that actually involves not only the finance department, it also involves the regulatory department as well. In my organization, there was a function created that we call a finance business partner. Those are finance teams who are embedded out with operations, capital, ITOT, and all the functions across the organization. They're tasked with making sure that projects are tracked appropriately, expenses are accounted for correctly, and all of the things that associate with that. So if something becomes emergent, the conversation starts with, well, do we open a project? Okay. That's when it comes, my team comes up to me and says, well, in some instances, we either don't have funding for it, or in other instances, it's a budget reprogramming issue, right? One of the controls we have in place is we won't open projects unless they meet certain criteria for costs to be incurred and charged against them. So there becomes a very high-level conversation. When I say high-level conversation, meaning at the leadership level of the company, that involves myself, either Mr. Burgermeister, Mr. Melendez, Mr. Figueroa gets involved from a regulatory side to then determine how we respond to the issue at hand.
And how, if at all, the fact that you would need to request pre-approval by the Energy Bureau affect those conversations and the need to move the work forward?
So it absolutely is a consideration. That's why I mentioned bringing regulatory into the conversation. Is that if it's work that's not resulting in customers being out of service immediately, then we would arguably defer to the process where we would go ask for the reallocation process, and then that's when we get into the 4 to 6 weeks potentially or longer that it takes for the work to actually be performed as we go through the regulatory process.
Thank you. No more questions.
Sorry, which relates to whether the Energy Bureau should modify the reporting requirement to be only 3 quarterly reports rather than 4. Let me be very clear to everybody. We are going to be done by 5:30 today. This gentleman has to get on a plane, and this section ought to be very short because we just want to understand better why there is a problem with the 4th quarterly report. And I'm going to ask again the witnesses, don't repeat what's in your pre-filed testimony. Mr. Maz has got almost a photographic mind. He knows that. Then we're going to turn to efficiencies, at which I'll give some thoughts initially as to what we're going to try to accomplish with that conversation. Mr. Mazza.
Thank you. Mr. Balbus, referring to your testimony, do you believe it is not possible or not necessary for LUMA to closely adhere to its budget during the 4th quarter?
Is that for me?
I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong person. Mr. Balbus, yes.
Okay, can you repeat it? Because you were looking
I apologize.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Do you believe it is not possible or not necessary for LUMA to closely adhere to its budget during the 4th quarter?
No, my testimony does not state that they're not going to adhere to their budget in the 4th quarter. It's just not to prepare an additional report that might be duplicative of the information that's in the annual report. Sorry. Okay.
Please, in that vein, then, please explain the additional resources and additional efforts that LUMA contends it requires to enable it to file the 4th quarterly report.
They have not quantified and provided to me the additional effort, but I would assume it's the same amount as to prepare the other 3, which I don't know what that is offhand.
So can you identify the benefits LUMA would realize if it were not required to track and analyze the data for the 4th quarter?
They wouldn't incur those costs that are no longer needed to prepare it, as well as distract resources to prepare that report as well.
Does LUMA do the same budget tracking for the 4th quarter that it does for the first through 3rd quarters?
It's my understanding, yes.
Does it do it within the same time frame?
Yes, because they're required to provide it at this time.
So if it does perform the 4th quarterly analysis at the end of the year, why is it reluctant to share that with the Energy Bureau?
No, it currently performs the analysis in order to provide the report. And so if they will no longer be required to, then they wouldn't perform that analysis and just focus on the annual report, which will contain that same information along with the other 3 quarters.
The 3 quarterly reports are due 45 days. The 4 quarterly reports are due 45 days after the end of the quarter. LUMA contends it cannot provide the annual report until 120 days after the end of the fiscal year. How does that delay in allowing the Energy Bureau to view LUMA's resource use during the 4th quarter? How does the longer time frame impact the Energy Bureau's oversight during that 4th quarter?
Okay. No, I would agree there would be a delay. if you just do the math, right, at the end of the 45 days down to 120, there would be a delay, but the PREB would ultimately get the information that it needs.
The key word that I guess we disagree is appropriate is eventually. That should not be the case.
Objection as to the arguments.
I apologize. It's okay. Yeah, I apologize. Okay. I know it. I retract that. Looking back an hour or so ago when Mr. Smith testified that there could be large discrepancies between the financial results at the end of each of the quarters, is it not true that the fourth quarter may have a large unidentified discrepancy which would not be realized until 120 days after the end of the fiscal year?
That would seem to be correct. That if the results of the fourth quarter, if they weren't provided, would not be included until the annual report. That's 120 days for the fiscal year.
Does Luma believe the T&D OMA does not require fourth quarterly budget reporting?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Does Luma believe, well, do you believe that the T&D OMA does not require fourth quarterly budget reporting?
I'm not familiar with that detail of the OMA.
Is Luma able to submit the annual report sooner than 120 days after the end of the fiscal year?
I'm not the appropriate witness to answer that.
Would you tell me who is?
I would assume one of the gentlemen to my left.
You state that the fourth quarterly report is subject to revisions. How do those revisions differ from the revisions that may be incurred by the three previous quarterly reports?
I would defer to Mr. Smith on that. That was the information that was provided to me.
Okay. Mr. Smith, would you answer that question, please?
Yes, the primary distinction or issue is that there are month-end or quarter-end or year-end accruals that typically occur in the accounting books and records. It's work that you've performed, and under accounting rules, you're obligated to recognize an expense for the work that you've incurred, even though you may not have been invoiced for it. An accrual, by its very definition, is an estimate of the cost that you've incurred. As you go through time, and that's one of the reasons that almost all companies take longer to perform the accounting close on a year-end close versus a quarter close, is that there's a process to get those accruals as accurate as they can be. So it's two things that go with that. One is with the passage of time, you actually get invoiced for the work and you can record the actual invoices. The other is you just work to clean up your accruals. So just as a prime example of where there could be a difference between a fourth quarter report and the year-end report is that you had an accrual for $1 million, let's say, in the fourth quarter, and the actual invoice comes in at $900,000 or $1.1 million. You would reverse the accrual and recognize the actual expense.
Doesn't that in effect mean you're backing into the fourth quarterly compliance with the budget?
No, because what the process would be is that we would close the fourth quarter to then feed the information through not only through the financial review that happens within Luma, but then over to the regulatory department who works with finance to create the report, right? What then happens is once the year-end process is fully completed, then to the extent that there are changes from the fourth quarter to what the full year ends up being, those by definition are changes in the fourth quarter, right? Because the only open period between the third quarter and the year-end report is that fourth quarter. So it becomes a function of the time over which those two reports, the fourth quarter report and the full year report, get produced.
So is it correct that the fourth quarterly report is subject to more flexibility than the first three quarterly reports?
No.
If the first three quarterly reports have to comply with the invoices that come in, for example, to take your example, why does the fourth quarterly report have flexibility with invoices that come in later on?
It's not flexibility, it's time. And let me explain what I mean by that. The difference is not in the fourth quarter report. The difference is in the year-end report. Right. If we think about the process going through, if you think about a public company, right, that reports to the SEC, they typically report 45 days after, or less than 45 days after the quarter. When you go to your full year or your annual reporting, the reporting cycle to file your annual report is longer. The process there is to get the annual records as right and correct as you possibly can to close the year. So I would argue that where the variability comes in is not in the fourth quarter report, it's in the full year report. Right? Because you're going a longer period of time after the end of the quarter to complete the year.
I'm not sure, unfortunately, if it was you, Mr. Smith, but I believe one of the witnesses did say that there was minor flexibility, minor revisions would be made to the fourth quarter. Does that sound familiar to you?
It sounds familiar to me. What I would clarify, and I'm not sure whether that was in my testimony or others, what I would clarify is revisions are not corrections. So maybe it was a poor choice of words if that's what was used. It's completing a more fulsome set of accounting and records, right? So while it's a change, right, it's not necessarily going back and revising something that was previously reported. It's improving the information or improving upon the information that when the fourth quarter was submitted, it was the best information that was known at the time, right? If you give a company another 30, 45, 60 days, the information that they knew, 2 months ago is now better than it was 2 months ago. And so that's how I would describe that.
So to reiterate a question that I asked already, but I'd like to have your perspective on it. Do you agree that that Luma does do a fourth quarterly analysis prior to the 120 days after the end of the fiscal year?
Yes.
And acknowledging that there may be minor, I'll use the same word, revisions, I don't know if we came up with a better word yet, to that, and with that understanding, which I believe the Energy Bureau has even acknowledged that it can acknowledge that to be the case, why can't a fourth quarterly report be provided subject to potential minor modifications?
And it is provided. I guess what we're raising the question of is that if Luma is also providing an annual report, which by definition the fourth quarter is a subset of, right?
Yes.
Is there incremental value to the Bureau for the effort and work that it takes to produce the fourth quarter filing to the PREB, as well as the annual filing to the PREB, given that one contains the other? And I'll just comment on, there was a comment or a half question about, could we do an annual report sooner than 120 days? And obviously I'd have to confer with my regulatory colleague on the timeline, but absent the requirement for a fourth quarter report, we could allocate those resources to submitting an annual report on a shorter timeline. I don't know that it would be 30 days, but it could certainly, I think, be less than 120 days.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Pardon me. But what you just said is very interesting. Here's the part that I've been missing. There's the effort required to make a fourth quarterly report. And then there's the effort to make an annual report, right?
That's correct.
One portion of the annual report is the fourth quarterly report.
That's correct.
So I've lost track of why there is an incremental effort associated with doing the work associated with the fourth quarterly report at one date versus another date. Is there an incremental effort or not? That's what I'm missing.
The incremental effort is that there have been two sets of reports that are produced. So, for example, when we think about a fourth quarter report, Luma would not necessarily internally look at fourth quarter variances, right? It would look at a full year variance, because we looked at a first quarter, second quarter, and third quarter variances. Now we look at the full year versus budget.
So what you're saying is that the annual report under your proposal would not have a fourth quarterly report. That's what I just learned from you. Is that correct?
It could, but then that would basically not eliminate any of the reduction that we're talking about here.
Okay.
There's a separate fourth quarter piece that is a separate piece of information that's produced.
Okay, so now I understand what's going on here. The choice really is this. If what I understand you to say is that your annual report under your approach would not include a separate fourth quarterly report, comma, is that correct so
That's
far?
correct.
Okay, that I was missing.
Right.
So really what we're talking about is this. The value to the Bureau of having the separateness of a fourth quarter report to see what that quarter was like, just like it wants to see about how the other quarters are like. The value to the Bureau of that versus the value to you of not having to do that so you can do the annual report with less effort, and then potentially the value to us of getting the annual report sooner. Is that correct?
I would agree with that.
Okay, I have no way to weigh those things, but now I understand what the proposal is. All right, I did not get that from the pre-filed testimony. I did not realize that your proposal of an annual report was not going to have the separateness of a fourth quarter report. I missed that completely. I'm sorry.
No, it would be a full year report, and that would, I mean, the way that I think about it from the CFO side is that the annual budget, just because of the nature of time and the volume of activity in it, Mr. Brady asked me earlier about variability from quarter to quarter. Absolutely, just because of the time and nature of a quarter. When we get to a full year view, that's the fiscal year budget.
Okay.
Right? So that's exactly what we're describing.
Publicly traded companies.
Yes.
Do they do a fourth quarter report? Do they do a fourth quarter report independent of an annual report?
No.
They do not.
They file a 10K.
So when you see the 10K, there's no way to see what the fourth quarter only activities were?
There can be fourth quarter breakout and management discussion and analysis in there, but they only file the one report.
Is it standard for them to have a fourth quarter breakout?
That's a good question. I'd have to go back and refresh my SEC reporting requirements.
Okay.
You've alluded to the fact that that Luma may be in a position to form the annual report sooner than 120 days. Have you done an assessment of what that could be?
I would have to confer with my regulatory colleagues. I would think, probably 60 days is the earliest we could produce it. I would say certainly, no longer than 90 days.
Going back to our earlier discussion about the US OA report, does that require quarterly? Does that entail 4 quarterly reports?
It requires first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and an annual.
And how soon after the fiscal year does the annual report have to be done?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. What was your question?
How soon after the end of the fiscal year?
I don't know. On FERC reporting, I don't know.
And is there a FERC 3Q report, third quarterly report?
Yes.
Is there a FERC fourth quarterly report?
I don't believe so.
Does Luma's management internally review its fourth quarterly financial performance?
We review monthly performance and quarterly performance.
So my last question is, it's, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you don't believe that the detriment to the Energy Bureau of a lack of visibility on fourth quarterly data on a more contemporaneous basis than 120 days or conceivably sooner is detrimental?
In my opinion, no.
Okay, cross-examination on this very limited topic. Remembering that we have efficiency to cover this afternoon. Cross-examination. Can I see hands, please?
Aye.
Please, sir.
How long does it take to do the quarterly report?
Quarterly report, typically we'll close the books between the 8th and the 10th workday. And then we're typically another 20 days after that to produce the full quarterly. So it's about 30 days, round numbers.
Okay, and you talk about resources. How much resources are we talking about?
So that involves a number of people in the organization. I mentioned the finance business partners earlier. Also, the entire accounting organization is responsible for closing the books and records, the analysis that goes on around that, and all of the reporting that's involved with that. a lot of that happens internally for internal management consumption, regardless. Where the next level of effort comes in is when the regulatory team works with finance to compile. It's a fairly extensive report, a lot of narrative in the report and discussion in the report. That's really the incremental effort, is formalizing all of that in a way to make it a publicly reportable document.
How many people are working that you said will avoid so much people not having to work on the fourth quarter? How much people are we talking about?
I just, at a high level, if I had to estimate that, and you can speak to your team, I'd say for my organization, it's probably 15 people that spend, 3 to 4 days focused on producing that report. And then I'm not sure for your organization how you would.
Right. And within regulatory, there's a team of 5 people that would work with the different departments and finance to take all that data. And there's a lot of back and forth, right? Because and to the question on the difference being that because it's intended to be a public document that would be used for whatever purposes, we make sure that it meets whatever requirements the PREP is looking for, that there's a level of accuracy that we're comfortable with if we get asked questions and are measured against it. So there's an incremental work that my team takes on. That means taking all that information, interacting with the different departments, and then preparing the finding that you'll receive. So in the
It's like 20 people, 3 or 4 days.
So I would say on the regulatory side, it's probably something that is ongoing for probably no less than 2 to 3 weeks as we start working with the different teams on the data as it's being gathered. And obviously the source of the data is the finance department, but then there's a lot of interactions. But
I just don't know how much would Luma save. Basically, the ratepayer would save by eliminating the fourth quarter report and going straight to the annual report.
So I wouldn't be able to quantify at this point. What I would say is, from a regulatory standpoint, what Mr. Smith was saying is correct. But the team that currently would be working on a fourth quarter report would not do that work, and instead would go and work with the finance team and supporting the annual report, which we will have to file as well. So there's a redirection of efforts there. So there is a benefit in terms of avoided cost because it's work that we would not do, but there's also an improvement in terms of just reallocating resources away from that fourth quarter report in order to support on the annual report.
You don't know how much we'll save?
I have not quantified that specific number. I would have to look at the amount of hours spent on that work and then associated support and see what that amount is.
Is that something we could request Luma to provide the Energy Bureau?
We could request it.
Okay. Right. Then again, I want to ask Genera, do you file the fourth quarter report and then the annual, or how do you do it? My microphone.
Good afternoon. This is Maria Sanchez Braz for the record. We file all sorts of kinds of reports. We have quarterlies, we have with P3A, we have.
No, I mean with us. Do you file a fourth
we have
quarter report?
file through Luma.
Do you
we
have
provide information through Luma for the quarterlies and.
Do you prepare an independent fourth quarterly
we
report?
Don't.
You do not?
Not for PREP.
Okay. If you had to, do you know what it would cost?
Well, depends on what you ask for.
Okay. How about PREP? Do you do a fourth quarter report independently of an annual report, Mr. Adrover or Mr. Adrover? Is that the answer is yes, sir? Say it out loud.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay, thank you.
And you file it with us, or does it all go through Luma?
I believe PREPA files it on its own directly, and it's just to clarify, it's PREPA files monthly reports. It does monthly budget to actual reports, and it only files one June report that covers the full fiscal year.
So Luma, when you file your trimester report, does that include Genera? Because I thought it only was Luma.
I am not aware that our
quarterly
report includes Genera information. I know the quarterly performance metrics does include Genera data, but not the budget quarterly reporting.
So we're saying that Luma does have to file with PrEP their quarterly reports, but Genera doesn't?
Again, at this point, I'm not privy of that information. I understand that we provide to P3 a quarterly report of actual versus budget, but as far we would need to ask the regulatory team if they prepare something. We do provide information for the consolidated for the PrEP, but I'm not sure that we do that independently for actual versus budget.
Does anyone know why PrEP only requires Luma to follow its quarterly reports and not PREPA or Genera?
If you don't know, just say you don't know.
No, I was going to say, I was trying to go through whether it's in the OMA that the filing needs to go to the PrEP as well, which it may be, we would have to check. But other than that, it would be an order from the Energy Bureau.
What other jurisdictions I know you said private utilities, but other jurisdictions, do they file a quarterly report? Or do they do, as you said, they don't do the fourth quarter and go straight to the annual?
Yeah, I mean, so I can answer about monthly earnings surveillance reports that are filed for investor-owned utilities and jurisdictions, and that are very simple calculations on earned return on equity. As far as any other filings, those are not required to my knowledge. I also, in my history, I ran a municipal utility in South Florida as well that was regulated by an elected body. And we did not have to file any quarterly reports. It was a monthly budgeting process that management reviewed, and we were held to the budget process at the end of every fiscal year.
Okay. I had another question, the last question. No, that's it. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I do remember the question I had. Luma, on the times that you have filed the fourth quarterly report, how many times have we issued a resolution based on the analysis of that fourth quarter report?
At this particular moment, I can't recall any resolution accepting, deeming the reporting compliance or not. This one I can't recall.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, colleagues, I'm going to give you a hearing examiner comment on the next subject on efficiencies. It may be consistent or inconsistent with the commissioner's desires, but I offer this as a way to make sure we can be done with this subject today. I've said several times that a rate case is not a management audit case. Our job in this case is to determine revenue requirement for fiscal year 26, possibly to get very close to a revenue requirement for fiscal year 27, and perhaps in the process of doing that, learning something about procedures for which the Energy Bureau can offer in its order some improvements and requirements. But I do not view this panel as a time to debate whether efficiencies have occurred or not. In fact, when I read the testimony, I'm solely giving you my personal reaction. When I read the testimony, what I saw was a generic set of arguments about whether efficiencies occurred or not without any quantification, which means we could go on for a lot of hours talking about who was more persuasive with their generalities than somebody else. And I question the evidentiary value of that, which I judge by, will I get something that can go into the final order? When I think about what can go into the final order on efficiencies, I don't see anything where the Bureau can make a specific dollar increase or reduction to the revenue requirement arising from the pre-filed testimony that occurred today. what I do think is valuable and what I understand that Mr. Mazza will focus on is the need to quantify rather than claim. Because without quantification, there is no way to reflect in the dollars that customers pay the efficiencies that are being claimed. And what I understand we are being told is that quantification hasn't occurred, but that hasn't prevented the claims from being made, which personally, as a person who's responsible for helping write the opinion, I don't know what to do with. So I'm not saying that, I'm going to stop the cross-examination when it looks into efficiencies, but I want people to consider the evidentiary value of what they're seeking when they ask questions, and to help Mr. Mazza focus in particular on how we can move to a point where claims of efficiencies can be quantified so they can be reflected in what customers pay. And by the way, that includes additional costs, which in the short term can achieve efficiencies in the long term. So efficiencies aren't just about finding ways to cut costs. Sometimes efficiencies are about finding ways to increase costs in the short term to produce efficiencies. You go to law school, they can cost you $20,000 a year. That's pretty inefficient, it seems, in the short term, but it can give you a lifetime of earnings and productivity in the long term. So those are my thoughts on what we're going to try to accomplish for the next 2 hours. Mr. Mazza, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to address these to Mr. Balbus. What is your experience and expertise in electric utility operational efficiencies?
Yes. So, as a former Florida Public Service Commissioner, we had annual proceedings on efficiencies gained in energy reduction and demand reduction for demand-side management programs for not only investor-owned utilities, but municipal utilities throughout the state. In addition, every 5 years, we had to go through a goal-setting process where we looked at technical and achievable potential, and through those analysis determined what those goals should be, utilizing cost effectiveness tests of total resource costs, rate impact measure, and participants test, each weighing each of those their appropriate weight. In addition, since leaving office, well, let me back up. Another very important annual efficiency review that we did for electric utilities was the commission put in place the Generation Performance Incentive Factor, which wanted to encourage and incentivize generation facilities to operate at their optimal level. So we developed a program where we calculated equivalent availability factor as well as heat rate and determined what was the benefits to customers financially if they did incremental improvements in both those measures. The incentive we put together was that the utility shared in some of those benefits, and I know a number of jurisdictions have that in place. That was an annual process where we would review in detail each generation unit, each heat rate, I believe on a daily or weekly basis, certainly on a monthly basis, to determine what that savings was, and we would reflect that in annual fuel clause proceedings. So we focus on efficiencies in depth. Since leaving office, in my capacity of being a partner in a global consulting firm, Guidehouse is probably the nation's leading consultant in energy measurement and efficiency measurement and verification programs, EM&V, where we go out and we quantify those benefits because some commissions do require it. And there's a percentage of cost that's passed on to customers through that independent verification. So I'm very familiar with the efficiency programs with electric utilities. And there's some other examples I could cite.
Explain that there's a cost-benefit analysis early in your response that was utilized as part of the goal setting for the efficiencies. Were financial benefits a part of that?
Financial costs were a part of that.
So I know the cost-benefit analysis does include that. Was the end result an analysis or a determination of the financial benefits of the various efficiencies?
No, the legislature at the time wanted to encourage energy and demand reduction and did not go through a quantifying process on what the dollar value associated with that reduction is. It was just, table stakes that we want to reduce it. So how do we do that without having subsidization from non-participants? That's the participants test, or having the cost of the program exceed the energy reductions and associated with it as well. So those are some of the analysis that were used, but quantifying what a kilowatt hour of energy reduction, adding externalities as some jurisdictions do, we didn't look at in too much detail.
But the cost benefit analysis would yield. The cost benefit analysis would yield a financial benefit, would it not? Or a negative financial benefit, but it wouldn't be probably pursued if that were the case.
Yeah, we deliberated quite a bit over what costs and what benefits should be included. And in fact, we had at the time what's called an ERIM test and an ETRC test would include environmental benefits, externalities that didn't exist, like cost of carbon, for example, other health effects. And so we felt that those weren't really able to be, they were just estimates at the time that, so we decided we're just going to stick to the tried and true measures. But so that's in that case, that's what we addressed.
Right. Mr. Bobbies, I appreciate the expertise that you're bringing. I've been getting pressure from various parties to make sure that I continue to enforce the principle that if there's a yes or no question, you answer yes or no and leave it to your counsel to give you opportunities to elaborate. And thank you if you would comply with that. Otherwise, I'm going to get beaten up by the other parties.
In your testimony at page 17, line 386, you cite a number of efficiencies that the Energy Bureau has identified expected efficiencies related to, and then you enumerate 7, efficient contracting for services, revenue collection from past due bills, transmission line losses, mitigating energy theft, addressing missing and malfunctioning meters, and collecting revenues from third-party attachments. Is LUMA pursuing these efficiencies?
Yes.
And has it been able to quantify the financial value of any of these efficiencies?
It has quantified its progress in those areas. I will say for the efficient contracting of services, I personally struggled with what is an efficient contracting of services, right? So you could look at it as you have the most competitive contracts and paying the lowest cost. Is it the contracting process is shorter? So I kind of struggled with what that is, but I know they're reporting progress in each of these. Whether the collecting of bad debt, yes, there's an amount to that. The contracting of services, I don't think that has been quantified. From a financial value, I have seen documentation how many FEMA funded projects they're pursuing, et cetera. But
so are you aware of whether LUMA has in fact achieved increased efficiencies in these areas?
Yes.
And are you aware of whether LUMA has derived any financial benefit from its achievement of efficiencies in these areas?
Yes.
Has it?
Yes, it's reflected in the revenue requirements calculated.
How is it reflected in the revenue requirement calculation?
So if you take technical line losses, for example, which LUMA reports on that, and you look at the amount of energy generated and energy, make it non-technical losses, energy billed for, as that improves, then the amount they're getting in revenues increases, and that's reflected in the billing determinants and the revenue requirements that I believe Mr. Shannon will talk about.
You assert that it's reflected, but is it specifically quantified to be reflected, or is it just some amorphous benefit that you're alluding to?
It's not amorphous, right? And if you look at replacing missing or malfunctioning meters, you're now being able to bill more customers that you weren't. So that's reflected in your accounts receivables. So it's reflected. Now, I think, I'll stick to a yes or no question or answer, but I'll argue that it is measured and reflected in revenue requirements, but perhaps not reported.
Is it able to be recorded?
Yes, I believe so.
So why has it not been when it's been repeatedly expected to be reported?
Well, a lot of a lot of times, every time, you have to weigh the benefits of the reporting. If you're comfortable that the benefits are being reflected and given to the customers, that the cost of reporting, a lot of times you have to have, I mean, they're just putting in a new AMI system, for example. In order to accurately reflect all of the benefits associated with that, the entire system has been put in. You have to put in the business processes to measure that and report it in another administrative process just to document what customers are already benefiting from.
Or are you not predetermining that the costs outweigh the benefits?
No, that analysis would have to be done.
So why has that analysis not been done?
I could not answer that. I would have to defer to another Luma witness.
As a former regulator who had to make judgments about whether the proposed revenue requirement reflected sufficiently efficiencies that you think were necessary, would you recommend that such quantification be performed by Luma?
Some jurisdictions have.
I'm asking you whether you recommend that that Luma should perform those quantifications.
I don't think for those metrics that are requested.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the answer. Maybe my question wasn't good. The problem that we're trying to address is the presence of claims without quantification and without easy, as a former regulator and as somebody who has worldwide experience on efficiencies that create financial savings. Do you have a recommendation for whether the company that you represent today should be quantifying those efficiencies that they claim?
I think if they're pursuing something new and innovative that has a high cost, I think it is prudent to require a cost-benefit analysis prior to approval. Okay. In this case, those metrics are standard metrics that are reflected in the revenue requirement, so I would say no.
So it's okay. Is your testimony that it's okay for a utility subject to the Commission's jurisdiction to continue to make general claims about efficiencies without having to quantify them? That's okay?
The efficiencies are quantified where they can. I think you're asking about the benefits.
Well, what I'm asking about is how the 5 commissioners can hold the company accountable to its claims if it doesn't have specific data that shows that the claims being made have actually been actually achieved, and whether you recommend something for the Bureau to do to be able to assess the credibility of the claims. That's all. It's a simple question.
Well, I can't answer for the commission. However, I believe if the commission wants to have assurances that efficiencies and benefits are flowing to the customers, they should focus on the areas where they think that the most benefit could come and that they feel that more in-depth explanation of the benefits and the costs are there. If they feel that's warranted, they should move forward as they see fit.
Right. The problem that we're having, I don't mean to ask you to solve a problem that nobody else seems to have solved yet, which is what techniques need to be in place to associate specific claims with specific quantifications of benefits. Mr. Mazza?
I'm sorry, I just need a clarification. So you said that the benefits are reflected in the revenue requirement.
Correct.
Can you explain once again how that's done if they're not quantified?
So maybe I'll try a different, I'll elaborate on my AMI example. If they replaced 1,000 malfunctioning meters that were under-reporting consumption, and now they are reporting accurate consumption, which is being billed and collected, that revenue is being quantified, and that is reflected in the revenue requirement. If they were still sticking to the old collections when they were malfunctioning, maybe you have a point, but I think that's not the case. And I know that's not the case. So we can go through the examples that I have. The one that I do struggle with is efficient contracting of services. I think that could be better defined as to what that is.
When you say back to the meters, when you say the meters, when they're replaced with functioning meters, et cetera, it's quantified, the benefits are quantified and reflected in the revenue requirement. I believe that's what you said.
Yes.
How is it quantified? I can understand your contention that it's reflected in the revenue requirement because
by the collections.
Where's the quantification? If it's quantified, there should be a figure somewhere. if it's just imputed, oh, we changed 10 meters, so we save, $100 a meter or so, or whatever it might be, that's a different story. If you just say, well, there must be savings attached to this.
Yeah. So it is in that in the annual reporting or however frequently they report the revenues collected from customers. And that is now more accurate by definition because the more meters now work or they have them than it's reflected and quantified.
But it's not really quantified. There's no quantification that I've ever seen.
I think if there's a
attached
number,
to
it's
that.
quantified.
And we've asked for it many times. There's no quantification. Is that not correct?
I disagree.
I'm probably the person that understands this the least, but I think Mr. Balbis, what Mr. Maz is getting at this is this. There's no reason to disagree with your statement that if, as a result of the meters, there is better tracking of costs and revenues, there's no reason to disagree that those increased revenues will be reflected in the revenue requirement. With me so far?
Absolutely.
I think what we're getting at is to quantify the efficiencies, there would need to be a comparison, right? Because the concept of efficiency implies a comparison with what you would do if you were not efficient. And I think the difficulty, and nobody's blaming you for this, the difficulty is that without a comparison of before and after, it's hard to measure. It's hard to come up with a number that says this is what we saved. Now, I do think that your meter example is an easy one because by definition, meters meter. They measure things. But as you pointed out, in the context of improvements to the contracting process, what's the counterfactual? How would you know what the cost would have been had you not implemented the improvements? Do you follow what I'm saying so far?
I do.
And I think that's at the core of what's going on here is that implicit in the questions is a concern that the claims about a change from old to new are not being accompanied by a quantification of the change from old to new. Your example being a good exception to the concern. Go ahead, sir. See what you can do with that.
So you brought up a different question, which I think is interesting, and that is to be able to point to the savings. And yes, if the commission wants to point to savings achieved from a dollar amount, and that is important to them, then absolutely they can move forward with requiring that. And I'm sure I will answer for them. Maybe it's because we've done it for other companies. You can do it. It takes a lot of effort depending on the metric, and you can do that. You just have to outweigh the costs and versus the value.
Okay, so what Mr. Mazza is pointing out, just so people know why he's asking these questions, is this. The Bureau has repeatedly said it wants evidence of efficiencies. And I've always inferred from that requirement that evidence of efficiencies be evidence of efficiencies, which is a comparison of the before and after of the effort associated with efficiencies. And the concern is that we have not all agreed on or come to a method by which the demonstration is occurring. And the concern, at least of the consultants to the Bureau, is that despite the requirement that there be the demonstration, there has not been one. Is there anything you can say in response to that? First, Mr. Balbis, because he's the one making the claims.
I hate to ask you to repeat the question, but since the microphone was there, I was assuming he was taking it, and so I lost halfway through. But if you want to repeat it real quick, I can.
No, I think it may be better for Mr. Figueroa because he's without a long essay. First of all, do you understand the question that we're aiming at is the problem of lack of quantification of the dollar value of the effort associated with the claim of efficiencies? Do you follow the point that I'm trying to make?
I do.
Okay. First of all, I'm going to express sympathy to you all, as I often do, that I don't know what the technique is, but my concern is that we're not spending enough time discovering the technique and applying it. Do you have any comments on that?
I do. And what I would say is the focus on the 6, we're calling them efficiencies. we've the issue with those is that the where that comes from is from a filing that was made very early on when Luma began operations, where it identified areas it believed it could improve the way that things were done. And so it identified these as examples. And since then, the Bureau has requested that that Luma quantify them and report on them. And we've consistently over the years petitioned the Bureau to, instead of focusing on these, focus on, if we want to quantify efficiencies, then focus on those that are that really matter. Because, for example, I could say we have more vehicles in service now than before, and that probably means that I'm saving in leases. I am performing maintenance on those vehicles, so I have more vehicle. My maintenance budget will eventually reduce. I can roll out more crews and respond to outages more quickly. All of those are potentially quantifiable metrics that you can assign to that particular initiative. So it's not that Luma does not want to identify and report on efficiencies. It's that we've always contended that the 6 that are identified and have been the subject of the PREP's determinations are not necessarily efficiencies to which we believe it makes sense to report on. We think that there's a whole other universe of metrics we already track that are probably tied to our performance metrics that we can develop a way of quantifying them and then tracking performance against them. And it may include something similar to, maybe 1 or 2 of these, but I think that's what at the core of what has been the issue over the past couple of annual budget proceedings.
So the recommendation, if I can put words in your mouth, the recommendation that you're making to the Energy Bureau, so that we can be in sync on what we ask for and what you provide in the area of efficiencies, is that the Bureau revisit the specific components of efficiencies for which we want quantification, and perhaps work with you, right, publicly, privately, whatever, to determine which are susceptible to quantification and which are not, and maybe arrive at some insights about how to deal with the ones that are not quantifiable but still cost-causing, and question mark. That's the sum of your recommendation for now.
Yes, and particularly on the way of quantifying them, the focus from the Energy Bureau thus far has been on dollar savings, and our argument has been that's a measure, but there's also measures of there's other ways of defining what a more efficient operation is, and we think that should be part of the conversation as well.
Customers don't pay for cost; they pay for service. And so one has to measure efficiencies not merely in terms of cost, but in terms of improvement to service. Again, various improvements to service can be quantified: how long it takes to get a phone call answered, how long an outage takes, what the cost of fuel is relative to 2 years ago, et cetera. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's useful, that a revisitation by the Energy Bureau on the nature of the quantification, specifics to be quantified, is what would be useful, so that we don't keep going around in circles about this. Is that correct, Mr. Figueroa?
That's correct.
You buy that too, Mr. Bobbies?
I think that's a good recommendation.
Okay.
So is it your testimony that the Energy Bureau has never asked about any efficiency other than these that I enumerated just now?
No, I wouldn't say that's my testimony. What I was just referencing is based on my recollection and what's in Mr. Balb's testimony, the 6 that have been always sort of repeatedly come across in the different proceedings.
So has Luma identified efficiencies in operational areas other than those identified by the Energy Bureau?
In the manner and form as these are intended, I am not aware of.
I'm going to reiterate. Has Luma pursued efficiencies other than these 5 or 7 areas?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Has Luma pursued efficiencies in its operations in any areas other than these 7 areas that we just enumerated?
So I think, yes, that's that's generally what Mr. Hempling was mentioning, that there's all sorts of areas of the business where we are looking to improve. That improvement resulting either a cost that's avoided, a reduced cost, a better service to our customers, mitigates risk as well. So there are different ways. There's areas all across the business for which we are looking for improvements, and there's different ways of assessing those. And I think if you look at our performance metrics and our legacy metric reporting, those are areas that you can point to and then look for, track against. So, so I think my only caveat is when you ask the question, if you're looking at as separating them and reporting on them in the same way that the Bureau has asked for these 6 different efficiencies, then my response is no. But are there general improvements that we're pursuing that through a process we can identify and they become, quote, efficiencies that are reported on? Then yes, those certainly exist.
I'm aware that there are other benefits to efficiencies than financial benefits. My question is, you seem to be emphasizing the non-financial benefits of efficiencies. It's important. I agree. What about the financial benefits of efficiencies? Have you identified financial benefits to any of the other efficiencies you're pursuing?
I mean, unless you want to say, I can't recall at this point in time a particular one, but I think part of the conversation is we are in a position where the utility needs more investment, not less. So part of the conversation is how do you use the limited resources that are available to produce the highest amount of benefit to the customer. And you achieve that not necessarily by reducing the revenue requirement by whatever amount is deemed as more efficient operation, but by creating those, again, quote, efficiencies, which means that there's more revenue to be allocated to other areas that require investment. So that part of the struggle has been that if we were in a different position, then you can potentially look at ways of reducing costs to ratepayers by looking for ways of areas where costs have been reduced. My belief is that the utility where it is today, those areas may exist, but that does not mean automatically that the overall revenue requirement or the needs for investing in the system are reduced by that same amount.
What are the circumstances that exist that you alluded to? You said under the circumstances that exist.
Well,
what are the circumstances that exist?
Are
you referring to the limited revenue, the limited base rate revenue pursuant to which you had to operate until now?
No, I'm referring to the state of the system, both in terms of physical assets as well as procedures and protocols and everything that's essentially part of the system remediation plan, which we are currently in the middle of. Those highlight a lot of the where are the key areas of focus for the system just to reach a remediated state, and then you build on improvements that get to better performing utility. And a lot of that work is still in progress, and I think that's why there's a need for investing and continue investing more as opposed to simply taking where you are today and reducing by an efficiency. Now, I want to be clear. That does not mean that we would not be able to report and say, progress in this area has resulted in a reduction in the overall cost of that activity by a certain amount, which would meet, I believe, the quantifiable component that you're asking for. I think we should just be cautious that should not mean that whatever are the sum of those, financial benefits should automatically translate into reductions in revenue requirements because the system does need more investment.
Again, what you're alluding to appears to be treading on the role of the Energy Bureau in making a determination about how the benefits of efficiency should be incorporated into the revenue requirement or not, whatever the case might be. And they have to look at this from the customer's perspective as well. Don't you think they would like to see an efficient energy company that says, is able to enumerate or quantify what it has done with respect to efficiencies? That's a rhetorical question.
No, but
You don't have to answer the rhetorical question.
no, I know, but
Next question.
No,
please.
okay. Please explain how Luma is able to determine the effectiveness of its operational or internal efforts to achieve efficiencies if it doesn't quantify the financial benefits of the efficiencies in the areas that were identified by the Energy Bureau or the other areas where efficiencies are pursued that you alluded to.
So the way I would think about that is, for example, let's use the efficient contracting of resources. When we purchase goods and materials, we purchase goods and materials for the system. Some of those goods may be consumed in an NFC project. Some may be consumed in a FEMA project, right? But we buy in bulk to try to, obviously get volume discounts, shipping, economies of scale benefit and things like that. I would argue that those types of decisions are made throughout the organization, all day, every day. Are the types of decisions that a functional business should make. To quantify some of these things, and we're coming back to this quantification issue. To quantify something like that, well, if I bought 100 poles, could I have bought 200 poles? I could have, and it would have reduced my cost on shipping because I'm paying a flat shipping rate, for example. However, at the same time, if I only needed 100 poles, I now tie up the money that I spent on the extra 100 poles, right, that sit in a warehouse for 3 years or 2 years or whatever, they don't get used. So that's not an efficient purchasing, right? So things like that become very, very difficult to quantify. Now, the flip side is there are things that are quantifiable, certainly, right? Installing AMI, right, and getting better meter reads, that translates into more dollars coming into the organization. I've replaced in my organization seconded labor with internal labor, right? There's cost savings to that because we've now gotten internal labor trained to the point that they can come into those roles. So I really think it's a mix of things where we definitely we track those things. I'm aware of them, but again, it comes back to how much money or cost and effort is allocated into tracking things. And a lot of instances are, hundreds of initiatives that, individually may have, in some people's minds, a minor impact on efficiency. In aggregate, they improve the organization. But then there's a balancing act between tracking those hundreds of items against the cost of each one of those line items that there are benefit that they bring. So I'd go back to Mr. Figueroa's point that, are there a subset of things that, maybe with us in the Bureau or whatever, we say, okay, these are the 3 or 4 or 5, 7 or 10 or 12 things that we want to track. AMI rollout, for example, comes to mind versus, tracking, are we buying 100 poles or 120 poles or, how are we maintaining our bucket trucks and things like that. I think that it comes back to this cost benefit. We could spend a massive amount of time putting a huge process in place to track, dollars, right, pennies, but to what benefit, right? I mean, so that to me is the balancing act. And I would finish with reiterating Mr. Figueroa's comment that if we had been a stable utility for 20 years and we had been rolling through an investment program and a maintenance program and had preventative maintenance and all these other things going on, you could say, well, are you trimming trees more efficiently now? Yes, okay, that's savings that could flow through to the customer. Where I sit is that, you can look at our optimal and constrained budgets, right? They're very different, right? So, we're sitting here from a position saying that the utility needs a significant amount of money invested in it. And so if we're able to save some money on vehicles, for example, or bucket trucks, that's fantastic, but that's money that we would argue should be reinvested into the utility.
Would you concur that efficiency programs incur costs?
In some instances, yes.
In some instances, yes.
In some instances, yes.
If you can't quantify the revenue gain, how can you justify the cost of a particular program?
And it's a fair point. I don't disagree with that.
Well, it's a question.
But you can't. If it doesn't go through the lens of a cost benefit analysis, then there's no point in performing the work.
Is there work you perform that you haven't done that cost benefit analysis for?
Well, maybe I answer your question a different way. Let me give an example where we're talking about here an efficiency that would actually incur cost. And let me explain what I mean by that. Luma has a heavy lift helicopter that helicopters go through a 12-year maintenance cycle in order to be FAA airworthy. Okay. The fleet that Luma inherited, the timing of those maintenance cycles got out of sync, meaning they were all on top of each other, right? They're all due for their 12-year review at the same time. So then you're struggling with having, a flyable helicopter. We have a heavy lift helicopter called a Super Puma that its engines are in Brazil right now, along with the airframe being overhauled. Okay. That helicopter is absolutely critical to us if we were, for example, to have a transmission tower fail as a result of an earthquake, storm, or other thing that happens, right? Being able to get into a mountainous region and repair that transmission line. So what we've looked at is the engines that are coming back from Brazil will not be in Puerto Rico in time to be installed for the start of storm season next year. Okay. So we looked at what are the other two alternatives. Well, one is we could lease a helicopter for a few months prior to the peak of storm season. The market work we've done, the bidding we've done, that's about $500,000 a month, right? To do that, we would lease that not that we're going to do this, but you would lease that helicopter for 4 months, cost of $2 million. Okay. We found a vendor in the mainland who can provide and sell 2 replacement engines for that Super Puma that's going to be almost a little under $3 million, right, to pay for those engines. So when we think about an incremental cost of about $1 million, let's just call it that, okay, we buy the security of having that heavy lift helicopter available for the storm season, okay, and for 12 more years, right, before it has to go through its next major maintenance overhaul, right, with redundancy of engines. Okay. So if you look at that on the face of it, you'd say, well, you're spending, an incremental amount of money, right, to go have these engines. Well, we would say, yes, we agree. That's correct. We are. But when we look at the value, if you think about $2 million to lease a helicopter for 4 months, $3 million to buy 2 engines to have the helicopter for 12 years, on a monthly lease rate, that's pretty cheap. Right, when I take the 3 million and divide it by 12 years, right? So that's why I struggle to answer some of the efficiency questions because if I have 5 less employees, yeah, that's less cost. I think that's very easy math that anybody can do. I could have the same level of employees but have them doing different work, and I could be much more efficient. Quantifying that becomes much harder.
Okay, last question. Last question for this segment before we go on to something else. Same question with what you just described with the helicopters is a fairly discrete example of a cost saving for a particular action taken. Okay. In general, with efficiency programs, for example, meters, and I'm not disputing the benefits of these, but any efficiency program, would you not agree it's important for the Energy Bureau to also see a concrete benefit coming out of those programs to see that it's money being efficiently spent?
No, I would agree. For on energy efficiency, for example, instead of just a portion of an appliance replacement being paid for, you could pay for free appliances. Just making an example up, right? That might not be cost beneficial because your break even of kilowatt hour savings from that appliance replacement, if it's fully subsidized versus partially subsidized, the payback may be 10 years. I'm making numbers up, right? But I would agree that those sorts of things should be quantifiable.
Okay, so you agree. Okay, folks, so we're at the halfway point roughly for this afternoon. Here's what I would like to do. It's 3:34. I'd like to take a break for 15 minutes till 3:50. When we come back, my records are that Luma has questions on the cross for Mr. Sanabria. Is that correct? All right, well, I would like to do that next. Are you ready to do that right after the break? Yes? Okay, and then after that, I understand that the bondholders have questions, cross-examination. Is that correct? And I would like to do that next. And then we'll see what time we have left to ask some more Bureau questions. Everybody good?
I have a
Mr.
question,
Hempling.
Mr.
Oh,
Hempling.
sorry, I'm sorry. One moment, please.
I have a question for when we come back from the recess. Okay. I want a response from each entity. You decide who would answer. And it's a yes or no question. Would you agree that a utility under dire fiscal situation requires more oversight than one that is healthy in order to make sure that the money is duly allocated to cover the needs and the public policy items that that utility is supposed to comply with?
Marisa Pata from PREPA, we think yes. PREPA answer yes to that question. An entity under a bankruptcy process shall need more oversight than a healthy one.
Anybody from Genera? Oh, sorry.
Good afternoon, Maria Sanchez Bras for Genera. Totally agree.
Thank you. And somebody from Luma?
I would actually disagree from a Luma perspective because Luma.
I'm not surprised, but go ahead.
Yeah, Luma arrived as the operator after the financial distress occurred, right? And so had Luma been instrumental in the financial distress, I would absolutely argue that oversight should be warranted or increased oversight should be warranted. I would actually argue we're on the other side of that. The financial distress is already in place, and we are working to operate the utility as best we can with the circumstances that we have financially.
I don't disagree that you inherited the fiscal situation, but for me it's irrelevant who is there. The institution is still in financial distress, or if you will, to remove personalizing it, the system is in a dire economic situation. So what sometimes may look like over-reporting, it may evolve into something else once we get out of this. But how, and just answer the second question, how do you think that we can efficiently and properly monitor how the ratepayers' money is being used, other than asking for reports at this, juncture? Because when things get better, believe me, I would like to receive less reports and look at less reports. But this is a little bit necessary right now, in our view.
So, Commissioner, if I could, I think the question is, how does the level of oversight, whatever that level is, result in a utility that performs better and closer to expectations? And I think that's the point that we are trying to bring up. We're not saying there shouldn't be oversight. What we're saying is that there needs to be a trade-off between the level of oversight that you're exercising and how that oversight translates to improved performance. Allowing flexibility, as we're proposing it, to manage a budget on a yearly basis, from my perspective, does not mean that the Energy Bureau has relinquished any oversight authority, and I don't believe means that the Energy Bureau cannot intercede if it believes that there is an action that needs to be taken. So my response to you is precisely that: is that it should be a level that ensures that customers are getting what they are expecting, but that the operator in this case, and in our particular case, Luma, has the opportunity to exercise its professional judgment in implementing a budget and a set of objectives that the Bureau is establishing.
I would agree with your premise or your response, I'm sorry, except for the fact that some things, if we look at them after the fact, there is no solution, because we're not talking about an investor-owned utility that I can tell them, this wasn't prudent, it's going to come out of your pocket. So that's why looking at the money is important, and it was in place in the last rate case order, because we're trying to prevent the ratepayers' money from being used in a manner that is not prudent, because we don't have any other recourse after. You're just receiving money for paying for the costs of running the system. You don't have a profit that we can go against. Even if we go against, as some people say, after the fee, it's not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough for some of the costs. So it is hard to find that balance. It's a struggle, but there are some things that there is no other solution. And it may be that in 5-10 years, we're in a different situation and we can streamline and let go of some things. But at this moment, you tell me, what solution would I have as a commissioner if money is spent and now I determine after the fact that it wasn't prudent? When I get the end of the year report.
If I might respond, Commissioner, so I would reference you back to an exchange that I had with Mr. Hempling, where I use the example that you can, through the quarterly reporting and any other, in some cases, monthly reporting, you can see where the trend is going, and you can potentially prevent imprudent costs from taking place, because that still gives you the opportunity to look in and say, hold on, the direction that you're taking is not the direction that you agree with, and you can apply any remedy. But speaking again, I'm sorry, speaking a little bit more broadly, I think there is no example on record that I am aware of an expenditure that Luma has undertaken, which this bureau has determined to be imprudent. And for each of the fiscal years, we have lived within the budget that the bureau has approved. So my reaction to your comment is, I understand your concern, and it is a valid concern. But I would say that we have, I think, on record, a level of compliance with your own directives that I think supports that the bureau provides that flexibility. Again, the bureau can take that flexibility away if it doesn't believe that it's adding any value. And I think the tools are there, and perhaps there's a process to enhancing those tools for you to review progress based on the expected outcomes instead of expected expenditures, and based on that, decide whether the utility is heading in the direction that you believe it should be headed.
I understand your response, and we are, at least in my opinion, this is the kind of situation that running that risk is difficult, because I wouldn't have a solution. You have said that hasn't happened. The fact that it hasn't happened doesn't mean that it could. And weighing the risk at this moment, to me at least, is very concerning to remove that measure and that caution that we have right now. We could be blindsided if something happens. And I'm not adjudicating or saying anything on the performance or of any of the entities, or of the three entities, but that tool has provided us with some visibility that otherwise could be very concerning not having. And I have the vision, or I at least expect that we can let go of that at some point. But I'm not really sure that the system is in an economic situation that could happen right now without making any judgments about anybody's performance, just based on the system's situation. And the same requirement applies to anybody. Everybody, those three components should be behaving the same way. Every dollar is important. So thank you, Mr. Hempling.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Scott, excuse me, Scott, I have one question before the break, please. It's very simple. And this is for Luma, and it's regarding the efficiency. Can you explain the efficiency results in a way a regular customer can understand, and if you want, like, plain and simple and to the point?
And can you do it without repeating yourself?
So, Commissioner, one one example that I think is
Not for the technical
No.
people, no, for the public and the person that wants to understand a little bit, but is not savvy in this.
So example is call centers themselves, right? We've with a similar or lower budget than what was provided PREPA in previous years, we've increased the amount of resources that we have available to answer phone calls. We've reduced the time of responding to those phone calls. We don't have limits on the amount of inbound calls that we receive. So now every call gets answered, and the number of drop calls has actually been reduced significantly compared to what PREPA was reporting pre-2021. So that is an example of a more effective and efficient operation within similar levels of funding for that same operation.
Thank you.
Any other sample that you want to go?
I'm happy to at some point provide so you have.
Yeah, and thank you, Commissioner, and I understand and appreciate you requesting that. In my testimony, I went through those 6 factors and looked at what LUMA had provided in its regular reports to the Commission. And I think that some of the past due debt, some of their performance, where they reported $890 million in collection of past due debt. I mean, that's real. Those are real dollars. That's a real benefit to customers.
If it's already in your testimony, we don't need it. Is there anything else?
I think
I'm asking.
Yeah, there's more.
Besides what's in your testimony?
Sure. There is, but, in the interest of time, and apparently, unless you want additional examples in my testimony, I can provide it, but if not.
Did you do an independent assessment of these, or are these just materials that LUMA gave you?
No, these are materials that are publicly available, and many of them within PREP's dockets.
Okay.
Mr. Hempling, if I may.
Yes.
Is there a possibility to excuse Ms. Sanchez-Bras for the rest of the afternoon? She has an urgent matter she has to attend on the office. She'll be here tomorrow if there are any questions for her.
And real quick, I wanted to clarify the previous question. I did check with our regulatory. We do provide quarterly to PREB directly on actual versus budget, just as we do to P3.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez-Bras. We'll see you tomorrow, and please have a good afternoon.
Thank you so much, and sorry about that.
No, there's nothing to be sorry about. We all have our personal and professional obligations. We'll all be back at 4 o'clock, please. Thank you.
Mr. Hempling,
1 minute, yes?
OIPC has questions to do some cross.
Of course you do, and I didn't. Oh, that's because you gave them to me several days after I asked for them, but so I didn't mark it in my thing. Remember, next time I give a deadline, please. Right, because it's supposed to get it on Saturday, so I didn't mark it down. You made me look dumb, but I'm okay with that. Okay. All right, very good. We'll see you back at 4 o'clock.
Mr. Hempling, would we finish cross-examination for these witnesses first? I suggest that we finish this line of questioning.
What I said is, first, I would like to see the cross-examination of Mr. Sanabria. Then we're going to have the cross-exam. This is on the entire topic of efficiencies. All right, and so we're going to have then the cross-examination by bondholders, and then we're going to have the cross-examination by ICPO, right? And that's what we're going to do. And then if there are more PREP questions, we'll handle them then. I want to make sure the parties who can take us to the Court of Appeals have enough time to ask questions. 4 o'clock, please. We will finish budget today. And then I will take a few minutes at the end, as always, to talk about tomorrow so that we know what the plan is for tomorrow and everybody clear. Ms. Mercado, I want to make sure I didn't miss something that you said. We're now, as I say, your cross-examination of Mr. Sanabria, okay? But when you asked me, what about all the cross-examination, I didn't know what you meant.
No, it's just, I thought the order we would follow is finish with the current witnesses before we move to Mr. Sanabria, but maybe it's that no one else is going to have.
Well, I just wanted to change. I wanted to change the subject, okay, and get a little diversity in here. And I didn't want Mr. Sanabria to think we were going to forget about him, and I didn't want to jam you at the end. So that is the reason for my decision, and I get to make them because I'm the hearing examiner. So thank you, and would you now please proceed?
Yes, Margarita Mercado Echegaray for Luma. Good afternoon, Mr. Sanabria. I just have
I ask you, sir, first of all, welcome. Thank you for your work on behalf of the ICPO. Make sure you find that sweet spot where you're close enough that you can talk loud and not so close that you get a lot of static like this, and do the best you can, but always talk loud and slowly, please.
I sure will.
Okay, closer, sir.
Closer.
Yeah, you're going to have to hold it up probably.
I sure will.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
My voice isn't the best either, so.
Okay. Well, I'm sure your brain is up to the task. Ms. Mercado.
It's there.
It's a balancing act with the microphones. Again, Margarita Mercado Echegaray for Luma. Mr. Sanabria, my questions, I will be referencing your testimony filed in this proceeding, Exhibit 53, OIPC 53, just to, that will be the main document. Okay. We may show you another one that it will be shown in the screen when I get to it. Mr. Sanabria, am I correct in that you are being compensated for the testimony that you have pre-filed in this proceeding and the testimony you're offering live today?
Correct, I am.
What is the total amount of the fees that you expect to receive for your pre-filed testimony and your testimony here today?
The fees that I have agreed with the OPIC is $100 per hour spent.
Okay. Do you know how much up to today you have incurred in fees for your testimony and work for this proceeding on behalf of the OIPC?
The total amount is approximately $7,000.
Okay. And the OIPC, when I mean the OIPC, the Independent Consumer Protection Office, or ICPO, I know we use it, the acronym Spanish and English interchangeably. Do you know what I'm referring to? The
Yes,
OIPC? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Do they pay your fees?
They pay them, yes.
Are you aware of if the OIPC raises its own funds to pay for your fees in this proceeding?
No, I'm not aware.
In preparing your testimony, could you walk us through who decided the topics that you would address in this proceeding on behalf of the OIPC?
Basically, the topics that I addressed for this hearing were basically discussed with the leadership of the OIPC office.
Did the leadership of the OIPC provide you a list of the topics that they would want you to address in this proceeding?
Not a list of topics, simply a couple of topics, if we can be redundant, that I should address in terms of statements previously made by some of you.
Okay, did those topics that the OIPC, you discussed with the OIPC, include the topic that we have been discussing this morning on quantification of efficiencies by Luma?
Yes.
What do you mean in part?
Some of it, not all of the testimonies that were presented.
Okay, so did the topics that the OIPC provided to you to discuss include the OIPC's position on Luma's quantifications of efficiencies?
Objection. The sister question is requesting the work product of because she's asking if the OIPC gave the position to take for his testimony.
I was unsure about whether that was actually the meaning of the question. Can I hear?
Among the topics that you discussed with the OIPC for preparing your testimony, did the OIPC provide you their position on LUMA's quantification of efficiencies?
1 second. You still object?
I'll still object. Asking our position is basically asking
Whether they-
our
No.
work product.
Hold on. Sir, let me hear you loud and clear. What are you saying, sir?
Asking for our position, for the witness to state our position that if we gave him, our position is part of the work product of the OIPC. So,
Well, that's really not what she asked. And this type of question is permissible because it goes to whether a witness is using his or her independent professional judgment or whether a witness is a mouthpiece for the client. And that's what the purpose of the question is. So let me just ask it my way, but the question is proper, which is when you were asked to prepare your testimony, first of all, did the representatives of ICPO tell you what position to take?
No, I was not told what position to take.
Okay. Did the people, did the client tell you what their position was on the various issues that you were going to testify on? Did they tell you what your position was, what their position was?
I don't believe they told me their full position on it. We just discussed the facts.
Okay, so when you prepared your testimony, were you aware of what their position is on the subjects that you were going to be addressing? Were you aware of their positions?
Fully aware, no.
Partially aware?
But I can imagine what the position was going to be.
Okay, I don't know how far you want to go with this, Ms. Mercado, but the question is permissible, but I don't know how much more you're going to get out of it. Go ahead, please.
Margarita Mercado for the record. Did anyone at the OIPC review your pre-filed testimony and provide you comments?
I'm assuming they were reviewed, but I was not told to submit it for review. I just submitted in of the documentation that I was presented.
Did anyone at the OIPC suggest any changes to your pre-filed testimony submitted in this proceeding?
No.
In preparing your testimony on the topic that we are discussing today on quantification of efficiencies, did you review public data submitted by LUMA on performance? This is data submitted in a separate proceeding that Mr. Figueroa referenced earlier today on legacy metrics. Did you review that docket?
I reviewed all the information that was provided to me that LUMA had prepared and submitted for the proceeding.
When you say for the proceeding, you mean this rate review proceeding, correct?
This rate review proceeding.
Okay, my question was different. Whether you reviewed performance data that LUMA submits in a separate proceeding with this Energy Bureau in case NEPR-AP-2023-0009?
I believe my response is no, but I'd like for you to clarify the question a bit. You're basically saying there was this other proceeding, whatever the number was, and that if I reviewed the data in that proceeding.
In that proceeding.
My response is no.
Okay. Prior to being engaged by the OIPC for the testimony that you have provided in this proceeding, had you reviewed LUMA's budget filings with the Energy Bureau?
I reviewed the LUMA budget filings, which was within the data presented for this proceeding. The filings that were made by LUMA that were part of the data used for this proceeding.
Okay. My question is prior to being engaged for this proceeding, were you familiar with LUMA's financial reporting information with the Energy Bureau before you were engaged by the OIPC?
Partially, probably minimal extent because of my background in energy.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What do you mean by partially? Does that mean that you were aware that this financial reporting by LUMA existed, or that you reviewed portions of LUMA's financial report?
I was aware of LUMA's reporting on a macro general basis.
Does that macro general basis that you just alluded to include being aware of the annual reports that LUMA files with the Energy Bureau on efficiencies?
No, I did not get to that extent.
Okay. Are you aware of any industry standard that requires an operator such as Luma to achieve efficiencies within a set time frame after it assumes operations of a T&D system?
No, specifically, no.
Are you aware of any industry standards that require an operator like Luma to achieve efficiencies within a specified time period after assuming operations of a T&D system?
To a certain extent, yes. Basically, data that I was able to review and evaluate, but not from this proceeding. Data from the shareholders where I used to work, that the three companies that were owners of Ecoelectric in this case were all in the same type of business.
Okay, but that data is not cited to in your testimony file as OIPC Exhibit 53, correct?
No, because I did not take that into consideration.
In preparing your testimony, again, the OIPC Exhibit 53 pertaining to efficiencies, did you consider whether the Energy Bureau required PREPA in the prior rate process to quantify efficiencies in order to request a review of electricity rates?
I don't have recollection of specifically PREPA having ordered to that the efficiency data be documented as part of the rate making process in their years of rate making process. I do not see that.
Okay. Your opinions provided in your pre-file testimony, OIPC Exhibit 53, are based on your professional judgment, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But you're not providing a rule, a clear rule of what the Energy Bureau should require in terms of how Luma should quantify efficiencies, right?
No, I have my opinion. I have my the way I see it. I have a form of seeing it, but I did not document a requirement for Luma in this case.
Okay. Are you aware that rates for the electric power system were set in 2017, correct?
Yes.
And those rates were set before hurricanes Irma and Maria affected the electric power system, correct?
Yes, correct.
And they were also set prior to earthquakes that also affected the electric power system in 2019 and 2020, correct?
I remember.
And rates, current rates, electric power rates were set before PREPA filed for bankruptcy under the PROMESA Act, correct?
I don't have recollection of the specific dates, but more or less from a time frame perspective, it's in the ballpark area. I had assumed that the prior rates set with PREPA were before 2017, 2015, 14, around that.
Okay. And those electricity rates were also set before Luma assumed operations of the T&D system in June 2021, correct?
Correct.
But in your testimony, you did not consider whether the current rates, in light of the circumstances that we have discussed occurred after the rates were approved, how they may have affected Luma's ability to actually meet the costs of operating the T&D system, correct?
Can you repeat that question again?
My question is whether in your testimony regarding efficiencies, did you consider how the current rate structure set before those occurrences, if that rate structure has allowed Luma to recover the actual cost of operating the T&D system?
I did not make a specific evaluation of that data, but I can assume, and I have assumed, that those prior rates set were not necessarily recovering all the costs incurred.
And in light of that you have just said, it's your assumption. Did you consider how that factor could affect Luma's ability to achieve efficiencies?
As I said, I basically did not do an exercise, but I assume that those rates set back in 2017 or before would be a challenge for anybody to achieve efficiencies.
Okay. I'm going to ask to show the witness OIPC Exhibit 53.07.
53.07.
It's an exhibit to your testimony. I'm not aware if you have it in printed form, but was included in my list last night.
Do you have 53.07 with you? Counsel, do you have 53.07? Because he doesn't have a laptop, he doesn't have it with him. My instructions were to have it so that, because he can't see from that distance what's going to be on the screen.
Just to know that he did broke his laptop. It's not well functioning right now,
Okay.
so that was the problem.
All right, but I think I see Ms. Rivera is pulling a rabbit out of the hat. The witness is being handed the document, and the cross-examination can proceed, please.
Thank you. Margarita Mercado
Thank you,
for the
Ms.
record.
Rivera.
Directing your attention to had you seen this order by the Energy Bureau dated December 18, 2024 before?
No,
Are you aware that this was included as an exhibit to your testimony? It's been marked OIPC Exhibit 53.07.
I wasn't aware.
So directing you to page 2 is the first full paragraph of that section. Would you agree with me that in that section, the Energy Bureau has statistics on payment collections by LUMA as with regards to government clients?
Can you repeat again?
If it will save time if you just tell him what's there and ask him to assume it.
Okay, so if I tell you that in this order, the Energy Bureau states that LUMA collected 96.3 million in past due government accounts in fiscal year 23 and 94.4 million in past due government accounts in fiscal year 2024. Would that be a relevant data point regarding efficiencies by LUMA in collections of government accounts?
Sure, if the money was collected from past due accounts, yes.
And in the same order, the Energy Bureau stated that LUMA reduced days sales outstanding, DSO, for government accounts from 179 days, 79 days in fiscal year 22 to 167 days in fiscal year 23.
Do you see that?
I see it.
Do you see that in the order? Exhibit 53.07.
Yes, I see.
Would that be also a relevant measure of efficiencies in collection of government accounts?
It would. It would.
You agree with me that DSO measures the average number of days it takes to collect payments from customers, correct?
Yes.
If I tell you that LUMA has testimony in this proceeding from its customer experience department stating that LUMA implemented a revenue protection team that has recovered more than 1.6 billion in collections since 2021 and has established more than 120,000 payment plans for past due balances. Would that be a relevant data point regarding efficiencies in collection?
Yes.
If I tell you that when LUMA took over operations, it inherited a billing system that was outdated in its technology and to bill customers, would that impact LUMA's ability regarding collections? Yes. Yeah. If I tell you that LUMA, that when LUMA inherited the T&D system, there was no formal collections process, nor a procedure policies to collect past due accounts. Would that affect LUMA's ability to collect revenue?
I assume yes.
And if LUMA had to implement, given the lack of those systems that I just mentioned and processes, if it had to incur in costs to establish a revenue protection team for collections, would that affect LUMA's ability to achieve efficiencies in collections?
Definitely, yes.
No more questions.
Redirect of Mr. Sanabria.
Mr. Sanabria, let me try to pull did you review any information or document from Luma more recently rather than what was the date of that resolution and order?
This is dated December 19, 2024.
2024. Did you review more recently information regarding the arrears of Luma?
No.
You didn't review? Let me. A second. I will refer to OIPC Exhibit 345.1.
345.1. What is the exhibit, please? What is it? Just name it.
This is arrears at May 2025.
Is what?
Arrears is an AR from Luma provided by May 2025.
Right. Does the witness have it?
Objection, the witness answered that he did not review information on arrears.
1 second. Did you review any information on arrears before you prepared your testimony?
Yes, yes, I did.
All right, ask the question.
Mr. Sanabria, what do you have in front of you?
A table with receivable balances assumed from Luma for May 2025 and June 2025. It categorizes by revenue class and by days outstanding with the totals in the extreme right-hand column and days that the column before. Then the previous 4 columns states that if they were either 0 to 30 days, 30 to 60, 60 to 90, or 90 to 120 days due.
I have to objection. The foundation has not been late. He said that he reviewed some information, but not that he had reviewed that in a prior occasion.
What's the purpose of this line of questions?
Basically, that Mr. Sanabria reviewed the document more recently than the one she just tried to question him about.
Counsel, any response?
He has not been asked whether he had reviewed that document. Earlier, he said he hadn't. I know he changed his answer, but the foundation of his knowledge of this document, he read it, but there's no foundation of him having reviewed that document earlier.
All right. Well, first of all, the line is relevant because you asked him about, you challenged his credibility on the grounds that he didn't know anything about arrears. So the line is permissible. The credibility of the answer will be based on how well he knows the information he's about to be asked about, and I'll allow you to recross him after this if that's if you ask me and I deem it necessary. Now, are you asking him to analyze this piece of paper on the fly?
No, I'm just saying that. Did you review that document? Have you seen it before?
I believe I've seen either this document or a document very similar to this, but I have.
All right, what's your next question?
Did you make any opinion on your testimony regarding that document about arrears?
I'm not sure if, I don't recall, if I used this document to document the arrears data that I was looking at, and I'm writing up a report on it.
All right, let me make sure I understand what's going on here. Perhaps it'll save some time. You criticized, in your prepared testimony, you criticized Luma's efficiencies, correct?
Correct.
All right. Before criticizing their efficiencies, had you reviewed their performance on arrears in any way?
Certain data.
Beg your pardon?
Certain data. I don't believe that's
right. What kind of data did you look at?
It was receivables data in arrears. I don't believe it was structured.
Back.
I may have forgotten.
Okay. Was it for what period of time in terms of what you reviewed? Well, don't be looking at that, sir, if that's not the document you looked at. You said that wasn't the document you looked at, correct?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Do you recall what period of time was covered by the arrears that you did look at, sir?
No, I don't recall.
Okay. Do you think it covered a year, a month, a quarter? Do you have any idea?
There were basically, it was a month.
Okay. So you based your, in terms of arguing, in terms of your testimony that Luma was failing to achieve efficiencies, the arrears portion of your basis for that was 1 month of data. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next question, please, on redirect.
Mr. Sanabria, is that the only, is arrears the only subject that you analyzed for doing your impression regarding the efficiency of Luma?
No, I read several documents. This wasn't the only one. If it was this one, there were other documents that addressed Luma's past due amounts in receivables.
No more questions.
Recross?
And based on the information that you reviewed, you alluded to in your answer, am I correct that you're not proposing any calculation showing how the arrears data that you reviewed should be considered to reduce Luma's proposed revenue requirement?
I did not make any proposal.
Thank you.
You didn't actually propose a reduction in the revenue requirement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What do you want the Bureau to do with your testimony in terms of its final order in this proceeding? What recommendations are you making to the 5 commissioners?
Well, in terms of the recommendation to the 5 commissioners, I would prefer to have the opportunity to review and confirm the appropriateness of the data that I'm seeing in front of me, whether it coincides with what I used, and then confirm to the commissioners what my opinion is.
I'm sorry for my question not being clear. I'm asking a broader question about the entirety of your testimony. Because your testimony does not recommend a specific increase or decrease in the proposed revenue requirement, my question is, based on your study of the situation, do you have any recommendations for the commissioners in terms of the decision they should make in this case?
Well, the recommendation to the commissioners, I would still recommend to them to allow for additional reviews to be made of the receivables data, and especially with the more current data, the last 4 months at least, and see if the situation persists in terms of improvements, and then recommend whether to either throw away, keep out the testimony, or incorporate the recommendations that would be made.
Right. So here's my interpretation of what you said. You tell me if it aligns with what your intent was. With respect to fiscal year 26, you understand that the rate decision won't come out until 10 months of the fiscal year is complete, about next April. Do you understand that, sir?
Right.
So what you're looking to recommend, what you want the Bureau to consider is whether in that order it makes some statements about how the revenue collection process should improve, but it should not make a specific increase or decrease in the revenue requirement for fiscal year 26. Is that a correct interpretation, sir?
It wasn't my intent. It was not my intent to recommend that.
Okay.
As I said, if I get confidence on the numbers, on the data, especially more recent data, I would still recommend maintaining a consistent approach to how to manage receivables and pursue an acceleration in the collections performance of the collection performance of the
revenues.
Other revenues, yes, other revenues.
All right. Thank you very much. All right.
Okay.
That completes the cross-examination of Mr. Sanabria. We thank you very much. You're welcome to hang around and observe the rest of the day.
Well, I have questions for Sanabria. I have questions for Luma. Luma, I understand that the Energy Bureau requires you to file a efficiency report and quantify the efficiencies.
I didn't completely hear you.
No, this is for Luma.
This is Alejandro Figueroa for Luma. I am aware of the Energy Bureau's determinations around energy efficiencies.
For Luma.
For Luma, yes.
And what was that? When did the Energy Bureau make that determination?
I don't have a specific date, but it has been a constant theme in at least the two previous annual budget reviews.
Okay. Mr. Balbis, are you aware of when the Energy Bureau made that determination? I believe it's in your testimony.
I'm not. So I can find it. I don't think it is in my testimony. If it is, then I'm mistaken. But I want to say 2021, but I may be mistaken.
It's on page 1, PDF 20 of 41 of Exhibit 3, line 378. I want to ask Genera, do you have that requirement as well to file your energy efficiencies and quantify them for the PREP?
I don't think we have a Genera. We're panelists here.
Oh, it was only, I thought the person next to you, you're not Genera?
If I may, yes, he is. We also have Mr. Ricardo Payens from Regulatory here, so if he wants to come up and answer the question of Commissioner Torres.
But I don't know if that's within his expertise.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought the woman next to Balbis was Genera.
No, that is Ms. Wittechek, who's a witness for Luma.
No,
I am Genera.
Oh,
okay, so I was right. She's Genera.
I am Genera.
Can you answer the question, or do you need
I don't feel capable of answering this question. I will refer to either finance or regulatory to do it.
Okay, Mr. Payens, can you answer the question? He was sworn in yesterday, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Ricardo Payens, for the purpose of record. You're asking for efficiencies report?
Yes, PREP requires Luma to file an efficiency report and quantify those efficiencies. Do you have that same requirement?
Well, if probably you mean the performance metrics report. It's a very
No,
big report.
it's not the performance metrics report. It's an efficiency report.
I'll have to check on the, we filed 19 reports to the PREP, so I'll need to check specifically. I don't remember from the top of my head right now.
The same question goes for PREPA. PREPA, does PREP require you to file an efficiency report and quantify your efficiencies for savings of the ratepayers?
No, sir.
No, so it's only Luma. Does anyone know why Luma is the only one that has that requirement?
I would not be able to answer that, no.
Okay, thank you. My questions to Jaime. So the Balbis report has a table and it says certain efficiencies will affect the revenue, the rate will decrease the rate for the ratepayers. I believe it's table Exhibit 3. Do you know the table I'm talking about, Balbis? Mr. Balbis?
I believe it starts right after line 404.
Line 404, yes, page 20 of 41. And that table makes reference to efficiencies that would impact the revenue the rate payers. Can you tell us which are the ones that would impact the revenue, the rate of the people?
Thought you were. Sorry. So I'm not the revenue requirement witness. However, in my experience and based upon some of the outstanding past due debt, I think that would be impactful. I think mitigating energy theft as well as the meters would be the most impactful. And I believe since they're just starting the third-party attachment revenue determination. In my experience, that wouldn't say it's insignificant for a geographic that might be insignificant for a geographic footprint of Luma's size, but I think that would be the order that would impact customer bills, I believe, the most without doing an analysis.
Okay, I would like to go to Jaime Sanabria's Exhibit 3, page 11 of 25, line 168 to 169. It says, and maybe you could recall, Jaime Sanabria, you wrote there that there's $1.317 billion in uncollected debt. Would that be correct?
So, Commissioner, you're addressing to Mr. Sanabria to Mr. Bobby's testimony, right?
Yes.
So
it's Exhibit
doesn't
3.
have it in front of him.
Page 11 of 25, line 168 to 169.
Commissioner, I don't know if we have the same problem than before, that we are addressing two different types of PDF. One have in that lines there is no remark regarding 1 point.
I'm in PDF Exhibit 53.
Okay, just read Commissioner, if you would read the question to which there is an answer, that will help the gentleman find the question.
Well, my question is, Jaime Sanabria it says there's an outstanding account receivable for May 31st, 2025 of $1.317 billion across all customer classes. And then Jaime Sanabria also says in his testimony that this affects the revenue requirement. It would be less the revenue requirement if Luma would have less collectibles. So,
Attorney Pedro Vasquez on behalf of the OIPC. We are addressing now Mr. Sanabria's testimony. So,
yes.
Mr. Sanabria, is in your testimony. Can you direct the page and line?
No. Sir, I think there's confusion about what your question is. Are you asking him to opine on Mr. Bobby's testimony?
Well, what I want in Jaime Sanabria's testimony, he says that he gives a breakdown of all the uncollectibles that are pending. If Luma would collect those, be more efficient on those, the revenue requirement would be less for the ratepayers. So that's what I want to bring to the table. And if Jaime Sanabria could give an amount that it would be reduced, let's say the government, you mentioned that the government owes 125 million. Residential owes 728 million. Commercial owes 210 million. So I want to address this inefficiency that Jaime Sanabria stated in his testimony, and how would that reduce Luma's revenue requirement to the ratepayers?
If it helps speed things up, I think this is OIPC Exhibit 53, page 11, question 15.
Mm-hmm.
The question, Mr. Sanabria, is this, if you can answer it. Do you have an estimate of how much the revenue requirement would be reduced if there were success in achieving more collection of revenues? Have you made such an estimate?
No, I did not make the estimate. Basically, I was testimony with an error that was found and corrected. I'm not sure if that's the one you're referring to.
I don't know. I have Exhibit 53, page 11 of 25, and it has those numbers. So if those aren't the numbers, then let us know.
Okay, do you have a table that lists the uncollected?
No, it's all spelled out in a paragraph.
Yeah, it's in a paragraph.
Okay.
But I don't have an estimate.
Okay, you don't have an estimate.
Can you calculate an estimate? Because you also said in your testimony that if we have the ratepayers pay all these uncollectibles, then Luma would not have an incentive to reduce its uncollectibles. So that's what I want.
Mr. Hempling, can I attempt to answer Commissioner Torres's question?
Mhm.
So a couple of things I wanted to clarify on that. Again, this is Andrew Smith on behalf of
And just
Luma.
answer his question without the essay.
So first, the past due amount or the payables amount or receivables amount in Luma's case that's being discussed, some of those amounts are very, very old. This goes back to commentary earlier about the quality of data that came over from the PREPA billing system. So some of those amounts are 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, right? Which I would argue from my professional experience are uncollectible, right? Where this would come into the revenue requirement is ultimately the bad debt experience of the utility, which I know is a separate conversation we'll have. But to the extent that Luma is able to convert more billings to dollars in collections, that bad debt expense shrinks. That's that much less, recovery has to be in the revenue requirement to address that bad debt experience. But in terms of a one-time acceleration, let's say, for example, I could snap my fingers and go out and make everybody pay today. Right, that would absolutely bring liquidity into the system, but would it not? It would not necessarily change the longer-term overall revenue requirement of the utility. Now, you might be able to shape the revenue requirement, right? So it much lower, maybe for 6 months, while that windfall of cash gets invested. But eventually, the needs of the system would be the needs of the system.
Okay, so that's going to be discussed in the bad debt panel.
In the revenue requirements panel, there's a line item for bad debt, which, as I understand it, Mr. Smith, the bad debt percentage is what's used in an annual revenue requirement to make sure that the people who do pay their bills make up for the non-payments during that year, correct?
Correct.
But a history of underpayments, collecting that money is a one-time collection of cash, which is actually financially unrelated to the bad debt, which is a prospective revenue requirement matter. Is that correct?
I agree.
One could take the one-time influx of cash from the collection of past due accounts and make it a revenue requirement revenue item for the year in which the cash occurs. But again, that would be separate from the bad debt percentage itself.
I agree.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, I would like to ask Jaime Sanabria, is there a way that you can calculate what you said, that the revenue requirement would be less if Luma would be more efficient, or these collectibles are much less? Because I know we also have a problem of liquidity, and this has to do with that also.
Well, I did not make a calculation. I don't have a number. But in general terms, if past due receivables are accelerated in collection, and you end up with a whole pile of cash from past due amounts, definitely it would impact favorably the outlook of past due accounts, because what you're looking at is an influx that's above normal in terms of cash collections, that in terms of what it does for you is basically provide a major contribution, in quotes, to your cash flow activity. So I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to.
Well, would it only affect liquidity, as Mr. Spitz was saying, or would it also reduce the revenue requirement? Or would it, or only bad debt would reduce the revenue requirement? Because that's the focus here. How can we reduce the revenue requirement?
And I understand. What I don't have a handle on, even though I saw it and read through it, right, are the numbers you're quoting, but it would definitely be helpful if that cash collection would impact favorably, lowering the past due amounts to an extent that you can freely say that you've accelerated or significantly accelerated cash collections from past due amounts.
It would reduce the revenue requirement for the year in which the cash appeared. Is that correct?
It would reduce the revenue requirement. Yes, I believe so. Yes.
In the year in which the cash appeared.
Appears, right.
Okay. but I think you're saying you are unable to make a calculation of what that influx of cash would do to the revenue requirement that we're considering in this proceeding. Is that correct?
I could make a calculation, but I prefer to do it offside after the testimony. It's right now handling the numbers, or I'm prone to doing some mistake, and I don't want that.
Can that be part of the OIPS's brief filing? OIPS's brief filing when they file their brief? Okay, thank you.
Shoot. Okay. Okay. Anything else, sir?
No, I'm done. Thank you.
Mr. Hempling, I think there's one clarification with the statement you made. I don't believe it would not be a reduction to the revenue requirement. It would be a reduction to it would be just an additional source to fund the revenue requirement, because the revenue requirement is what it is, and then you calculate what you recover of that revenue requirement through rates. And I think that's an important distinction, because it goes to the point of the needs. What you need to invest into the system ultimately is not defined by your sources of funding. It's defined by what the needs are, and then you define what are the different sources or pots of money that will go to fund that revenue requirement. But I think that distinction is clear.
I think I know the point that you're making, and probably you and I are using the term revenue requirement in different ways. The way I understood a revenue requirement is that it's the costs, but then you credit against the costs the revenues that you bring in from various efforts, and that gives you a net revenue requirement. But I think we understand each other. Is that fair enough for today, sir?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your patience. Thank you, Mr. Sanabria, for your patience. We now have cross-examination by the
Just briefly for the record, just to
Finish
say,
my sentence, by the bondholders,
Okay.
and now you can interrupt me.
yeah, no, for the record, that if additional evidence in the form of a calculation on a proposed reduction in the revenue requirement on or forecasts on sales on revenues, we would reserve the right to, state our position then and react to that.
Obviously, you can always keep us on track. I don't know that this is actually going to happen, but if it does, we'll make sure that we follow the proper procedures. Mr. Brady, welcome back.
Thank you. For the record, Corey Brady, Weil, Gotchel, and Manji, speaking on behalf of the bondholder interveners. A few questions for you, Mr. Figueroa. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Do you recall when you were talking with Mr. Mazza earlier, he asked you about some efficiencies metrics that PREB had requested that LUMA report on, including line losses?
Yes.
And also non-technical losses or energy theft?
Yes.
And then do you recall you brought up another example of inefficiency that you thought was more important, which was bringing more vehicles into service?
I recall the statement I make. I don't think I agree with the characterization, but yes.
Okay, well, you brought that up because it was not one of the enumerated PREB requirements, right, for efficiencies reporting?
I brought that up because I thought that there were more ways of measuring potential efficiencies than the ones that listed in that list.
Okay, fair. So that's an additional one that you'd like to consider. The
That's an
vehicles.
example.
Yeah. Okay. Could the clerk bring up LUMA Exhibit 921? And this is the LUMA annual report for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2025. 921. It's a LUMA exhibit. 921. And then we're going to be going to page 48 out of 50 in the PDF numbering. I'm sorry, it was not on the list because it was only uploaded today by LUMA. Or, okay, we only saw it today, yeah.
Can you tell me the number of the exhibit again?
Yes, it's 921, 921.
Just trying to scroll through the.
Yeah, it's if you want to jump to the page, it's 48 using the PDF numbering. Exactly, yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Mercado is going to show the witness the document. Thank you, Ms. Mercado.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So going about halfway down the page to operations, do you see where it says decrease the number of vehicles out of service from 14% to 4%, an improvement of 10%?
Yes.
And that's what you were talking about, right?
Generally.
Generally.
Generally, not that specific metric, but yes.
Okay, so looking at this page, this is the LUMA efficiencies reporting for the most recent fiscal year end, right?
Yes.
And just to confirm, there are no dollar amounts for any efficiencies reported on this page, right? You can take a moment to look.
I believe there isn't. Yes.
There is not, right?
There are not no dollar values assigned. Yes.
Okay, including for the vehicles out of service that we were just talking about.
Correct.
Okay, and just to save us time, for the clerk, it's 48 of 50 on PDF. You can just type it in the box at the top, 48, and it'll jump straight to it. Okay. So to save time, I'm not going to pull up the one from last year. I am looking at it. Your counsel can check me on this, but in the fiscal year 24 year-end report on the same page, I'll represent to you that it says on this line item, decrease the number of vehicles out of service from 14% to 5%, an improvement of 9%. Can you assume that for me, or if you know?
I'll take your word for it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So basically, from fiscal year 24 to 25, LUMA improved this particular item 1%, right? Under that assumption, which, again, your counsel can check me on this if she doesn't believe me.
No, so I would have to say perhaps. I mean, but if you're just going that we reported a reduction to 5% in 24 and now reporting a reduction to 4%, and assuming that that's the starting point from 24 to 25, then yes, it would be 1%.
Okay, thank you. And do you know, in terms of LUMA's overall number of vehicles, what would that 1% improvement actually translate into in terms of vehicles?
I do not have that number out of the top of my head.
Do you know even ballpark? Like, are we talking 100 vehicles, 10 vehicles, 1 vehicle?
Assuming 2,000 less than you're talking.
20 vehicles in a year.
More or less, just for purposes of the question or example, yes.
Okay, so is the reason you didn't put a dollar value on that because the dollar value impact is so low for 20 vehicles?
No, it isn't.
You could figure out the dollar impact of that, right? It's possible.
I think that's what we were discussing with Mr. Hempling. Yes, it is possible.
But as you said, you didn't on this page.
Yes.
Or anywhere else.
That's correct.
Now, in terms of this number of vehicles figure, I think you mentioned that the efficiency as you envision it here is a reduction in lease costs because you're bringing back your own vehicles into service, right?
As an example, again, yes.
Okay. But when you switch back to your own vehicles by bringing them out of maintenance and away from a leased vehicle, there could also be increased costs, right?
Potentially.
For example, using a newer leased vehicle might actually be more fuel efficient than bringing back an older vehicle that was out of service, right?
That is always a possibility.
And you might also have to do more maintenance on that older vehicle than you would on a newer leased vehicle, right?
That would be another consideration on whether to bring back the vehicle into operation, into service.
Did LUMA do a cost benefit analysis of how the costs of bringing vehicles out of service compared to the costs of continuing to use leased vehicles?
I think that's something that my colleague, Mr. Burgermeister, would have to respond to. That would be something that he would be responsible for performing.
So you don't know?
But I don't know, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't been performed.
Okay. But you put together this regulatory filing, right, on efficiencies?
Yes, this filing is my responsibility. Yes.
Okay. And so before you told the PREB that this was an efficiency you had achieved, you didn't actually check if a cost benefit analysis had been done to see if it did reflect cost savings?
Not necessarily. I mean,
well, that's what you just said, right? You don't know.
I said I am not aware personally that it was performed, but it doesn't mean that my team did not verify and we do quality checks with the different teams to make sure that the numbers that are being reported are numbers that the business can support. And that's what I mean by checks. Now, the specific question of whether a cost benefit analysis was performed to determine whether to get to that number made sense, I cannot respond to that question today.
And a cost benefit analysis is what you would actually need to decide whether it was cheaper to keep using new or leased vehicles versus bringing older vehicles out of disservice.
Presumably, one of the considerations would be that, yes.
Okay. And then another example you gave when you were talking to Mr. Maza was call center improvements, right?
Yes.
And that's reflected here in this Luma Exhibit 921 under the customer service heading.
Yes.
And I believe one of the things that you mentioned was that unlike under PREPA, you now have an unlimited number of lines at your call center, right?
Yes, what it means that we don't limit the amount of inbound calls we can receive at any point in time.
Right. So basically there isn't a situation where someone calls up a Luma and they just get a busy signal and hang up, right?
Previously, the system would just drop the call automatically.
Or just drop them. Okay. So fair to say that's better customer service than what existed before, right? Because people's calls aren't getting dropped.
It is one of the metrics we report on, yes.
But even though it's better customer service, the costs actually could go up on customer service with that change, right?
So to the extent that there are more inbound calls being received, the more calls received, the more costs are incurred, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we are incurring more costs than what we were incurring before, or PREPA was incurring before, in addressing a larger number of calls.
Right. I mean, you have to pay people at the customer service center, right? Of
course.
And the more calls they handle, the higher your costs are, right?
I'm not sure if that's necessarily the case, no.
Well, wouldn't it take more time to handle more calls, all else being equal?
Yeah, I don't think we compensate customer service representatives based on the number of calls they answer on any given day.
Yeah, no, that's not what I'm suggesting, but they're compensated based on time in some form or fashion, right?
Yes.
Right. So if they're taking more calls, they're going to be working more hours, right?
Not necessarily.
Okay, but it's more likely than not that the more calls that you have, the costs aren't going to go down. They're going to be the same because you're realizing economies of scale, or they're going to go up. They're not going to go down.
Yes, but his question was almost on a per employee basis. That's what I'm saying. It isn't.
No, it's not. I'm asking about total costs. It's not per employee.
Total costs. Higher volume of calls could lead to higher costs. Yes.
Okay. And did you attempt to quantify the difference in costs when making that switch from PREPA's model, where people got dropped sometimes, to the model where you have unlimited call answering?
I don't have that information. That was something that was performed by our customer experience teams early on. So I don't have that specific piece of information with me.
Okay. Okay, going back to the examples like line losses and electricity theft, those are metrics that are inherently capable of being quantified, right?
Yes.
So it is possible to say line losses were X in year one, they were X in year two, and here's the difference, right?
It is possible, yes.
And then it's possible to assign a dollar value to that difference, right?
Again, everything's possible.
Well, it's not even particularly hard to do that calculation if you've already figured out the line losses in year one and year two, right? Just subtract them.
Yes.
Yeah, and then multiply by the number of kilowatt hours, the value of those kilowatt hours, which Luma knows, right?
Assuming that the data and the studies are there, yes, you can perform those calculations.
Do you collect data on line losses?
The utility does.
Luma does, or PREPA does. Okay, so you could calculate that.
Yeah, I've said yes.
Okay. But Luma hasn't done that.
No, line losses?
No, the monetization of the difference in line losses over time, the efficiencies that we're talking about here today.
Yep. So not for purposes of any reporting, but it is one of the things that we monitor on a regular basis. But as I said, you don't only look at line losses and that's the only data point that you assess in order to determine the impact on cost into the system. You have to also have, for example, a starting point to which you compare that, and that's an example of that, the amount of energy that's going into the system as the starting point, right? Because generators don't generate it. You can't only use the energy that's generated by the generator gross and then compare against what's built. There's losses within the generator. There's self-supply that the generator provides, and then you meter what goes into the system. So you have to make that calculation that you're saying, you have to assume that all those data points are exist and are correct. But so I'm saying it's not as simply as you described it.
But you don't do it, is what he asked, right? You don't do it.
In terms of monetary value that's reported, no.
That's the question he asked about a page of transcript before. Go ahead, next question.
And like you just said, you do meter the electricity that goes into the system from the generators, right?
I believe that's not information that we don't, right? No, we don't.
This is Andrew Smith for Luma. My understanding, and I have to defer to our capital programs team, my understanding is that the system does not have boundary meters. And in fact, that's one of the budgetary items in the fiscal 26 budget is to actually install those boundary meters to get to the point Mr. Brady is making and then Mr. Figueroa is trying to make, is that without good data, we're guessing.
Does Genera give Luma any data on what energy it's generating?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a data point for figuring out how much is entering the system, right?
No, it isn't.
You don't understand how much Genera is generating versus how much is actually going to customers?
That's precisely the point of having the boundary meter, so you know exactly the amount of energy that's entering the system, and at which point then you compare against what is being delivered to the customer meter.
Okay, so let's back up. You said that Luma does calculate line losses, right?
Yeah, right. It's based on the best available data, and it would be an estimate. That's what I'm trying to.
Okay, so it's not going to be perfect, but
yeah, it's not going to be perfect.
Right, but you do have a number. You do that, right?
You can calculate a number.
Right, and you could subtract your estimate in 1 year from your estimate in the next year and come up with a difference and multiply that by the number of kilowatt hour value of that electricity, right?
You can make that calculation. Yeah.
And that would not be a particularly difficult or complicated calculation, right?
The question is how much you can
X minus X times X.
A simple mathematical equation as you described it, yes.
Okay, thank you. When Luma filed for its first budget approval in June of 2021, it represented to the Energy Bureau that it would achieve efficiencies and savings, right?
I don't recall the specific language, but
I can show it to you if you want.
I'll assume that you're correct.
Okay. It did. Can we pull up bondholder exhibit 919?
Could you name the exhibit, please?
Yes, it's Luma's initial budgets filing before PREB in 2021. Bondholder 919. This one was on our list.
Okay, go ahead with the question. He probably can answer it without seeing the document. Maybe he can.
Okay, and I think you may have alluded to this when you were talking to Mr. Maza earlier, but this initial budget filing, it actually did include a line item for future efficiencies, didn't it?
If you say so. I'm not familiar with that.
Could the clerk please pull up bondholder exhibit 919 so the witness can see it?
She's looking for it. In the meantime, is there something that we can do?
I'm sorry, Mr. Hempling, there's not, because he doesn't remember and he needs to see it.
All right. Well, in the meantime, maybe you can ask him to assume some things, because otherwise we'd just be sitting here. I can't make the process move any faster than it is.
It's 919, and we're going to go to PDF page 117.
Is there any way we could start another line while we're waiting?
There's not, because this is my last line.
All right. Okay. Sorry.
I can see it.
I got it. You have it, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Please ask the question.
Okay. It's still not up on the screen, but I'll go ahead. Okay, so are you on that page I mentioned, Mr. Figueroa? Okay, so do you see that there actually is a line item there estimating projected efficiencies for 2023 and 2024?
Yes, line 7.
Yes. I'll have to take your word on that because I still can't see it. It's bondholder exhibit 919.
We can trust each other.
Okay. Page 117 of the PDF.
Are you ready for the question, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you know whether Luma actually hit those estimates of efficiencies in its filing?
I don't.
And in later filed budgets by Luma, it stopped including that line item, didn't it?
It is my understanding that it's not included. Yes.
And in this rate petition that we're considering here, Luma again did not include such a line item for future efficiency,
Correct.
right? Thank you.
Ms. Ramsey.
For the record, this is Alexis Ramsey with Weil, Gottschall, and Minges, representing National Public Finance Guarantee Corporation, and questioning on behalf of the Intervenor Bondholder Group. I have a few questions for Mr. Balbise. Hello, Mr. Balbise. Sorry, excuse my voice, and I'm doing my best here. Are you aware that counsel for Luma proposed withdrawing your testimony on efficiencies for this proceedings?
I am not.
Does that change your opinions at all?
No.
Do you agree with Do you agree with Commissioner Santos that a utility in economic distress should report more to keep regulators or customers up to date and trusting the utility, perhaps even to the detriment of efficiencies in the short term?
I think that's a consideration the commission needs to make, and it could result in exactly that.
A little louder, please.
Sorry.
Additionally, once calculations and reporting schemes are developed, they will be easier or take fewer resources to report later on, correct? It's the initial reporting ramp up and data sorting that takes the most resources, right?
Typically, yes.
In your SIR rebuttal, you stated that Luma could not quantify efficiencies right now because several of its initiatives are in their infancy. You don't specify which initiatives are in their infancy. So which initiatives are those?
I believe the clearest examples are the third-party attachments, as well as any of the collection of past due debt and the the AMI replacement of damaged meters, as well as new meters. Those two, since the AMI program is still in process, would be difficult, and the third-party attachment process is still being worked out.
Are there any others that you are aware of that are in their infancy?
I think those two are the best examples.
Thank you. We discussed this earlier, but you are now aware that Luma has been operating the grid since June of 2021, and that's about 4.5 years ago, correct?
It's subject to check. Sounds right.
Yeah, please take my word for it, but that is correct right now. And were you aware that Luma also had a front-end transition period for a year before that, beginning of June of 2020?
That's my understanding.
Do you understand that the front-end transition period was so that Luma would have a chance to get to know the transmission and distribution system and be ready to start operating in June of 2021?
I'm not familiar with the reasons of a transition period in the OMA.
Okay. Will you take my word for it that that is the reason behind the front-end transition period for my next set of questions?
I will not, because I would expect you to have been a part of the negotiations of the contract. So I could agree that it could be a reason. If that gets us where you want to go.
Sure, let's do it that way. And the front-end transition period started about 5.5 years ago, is that right?
If that started a year before they took over, then that would be correct.
So how is it that Luma's initiatives to achieve efficiencies are still in their infancy about 5.5 years after Luma took over?
I'm not familiar with the details of their corrective action plans, the sequence, or what programs and when they were supposed to come online would be.
And you were not informed of that before you gave your opinions in this case, is that right?
No, but I did review of where those programs were at the time I filed my testimony.
Thank you. Do you recall earlier when Mr. Smith was talking, and please correct me if my memory is incorrect, but my understanding is that Mr. Smith said it would be costly to perform the calculations to quantify and then report efficiencies, such that it would become inefficient to perform those calculations as compared to the cost of implementing the program at all. Do you remember that? And please correct me if I'm incorrect.
That sounds familiar.
Okay. Have you, or to your knowledge, anyone at Luma actually done the analysis to know whether that is true?
I do not have any knowledge of that.
Earlier, you talked about malfunctioning meters. You answered a question in your sir rebuttal testimony about Luma quantifying its efforts to reduce malfunctioning meters. And that is at page 20 in Exhibit 3. If you want to look at it, I only have high-level questions for you, though.
Okay.
Do you know whether a customer's bill is estimated when a meter is malfunctioning?
I'm not familiar with Luma's practices in that case.
May I please pose that question to the Luma witnesses? Do any of you know if a customer's bill is estimated when a meter is malfunctioning?
Yes.
I just want to state for the record that this our counsel for the same party asking a second set of questions to our witnesses, just for the record. I understood it was going to be one attorney per cross-examining each witness.
Thank you, Ms. Mercado. Let's put it this way. I'll give everybody a one exception opportunity. Look, we're just trying to learn from each other. Not everybody can cover everything. Not everybody can cover as much as you do personally. Let's not make a whole habit of it. But this young person is doing such a good job. I didn't say I agree with anything she's getting, but she's getting a good rhythm going. So let her finish up, and she's very efficient. And thank you for reminding me of my own rules. Please continue.
For the record, Corey Brady, it's not an exception to the rule. I've been questioning Mr. Figueroa today. My colleague, Ms. Ramsey, has been questioning Mr. Balbis. She simply asked for a clarification because Mr. Balbis did not know the answer to a technical question. Mr. Smith clarified, so there's no issue with the rules.
Continue, please.
Thank you. So when replacing a malfunctioning meter, now that we know that the customer's bill is estimated when there is a malfunctioning meter, when replacing a malfunctioning meter, that could generate more revenue or not, depending on the accuracy of the estimated bill. Is that correct?
I would like to clarify that the estimated bill process for utilities is typically when there's a known malfunctioning meter or there's no meter read at all or signal loss. And then they go through their estimating process that's in accordance with commission rule. If there is malfunctioning meters that they're not aware of, it can result in registering less usage, would result in less revenue, and they wouldn't even know about it. And that doesn't even touch the fact of tampered meters, where people typically or never tamper with meters in order to have an increased usage. So we see that a lot in the state of Florida, and we've seen estimates of 1 to 3% of meters that are just tampered or outright theft, which can result in significant revenue loss.
Are you aware of any tampering of meters here in Puerto Rico?
I have heard of Luma's efforts to eliminate the tampering and theft of meters.
Could Luma compare the old estimate to the new meters reports once a meter has been replaced?
I'm sure. Sounds like they could. I mean, I believe they could.
Are you aware of whether Luma has that data?
I am not aware.
And you were not provided any. Let me back up. Based on the public documents that you reviewed, you are not able to do that cost estimation, are you?
I don't recall seeing in the documents that I reviewed any data to that effect.
Thank you. You state that Luma is already meeting the PREB's requirements for quantifying efficiencies, but as we heard, the Commission is looking for reporting of specific efficiencies. In your rebuttal, you state that Luma submits, I'm going to quote, In your sir rebuttal, you state that Luma submits reports on more than 594 performance metrics and provides annual reporting on efficiencies. And this is your sir rebuttal is Exhibit 76 at page 8. But performance metrics are not the same as efficiencies. Is that correct?
I would agree there's differences. There are differences.
Okay. They can possibly lead to efficiencies, but they're not the same.
Efficiencies could be a component of performance metrics and vice versa. So
I see.
efficiencies could be a part of performance metrics as well as vice versa.
Okay. But as we just heard Mr. Brady discuss with Mr. Figueroa, for example, when a vehicle comes back online, it could cost more to bring it back online than just to rent a new vehicle. So even if the performance metrics of vehicles coming back online has increased, that does not necessarily represent a increase in efficiency for the utility.
No, that is correct, and that is why, in response to my an earlier question, I questioned the 6 or 7 efficiencies that came out of the 2021 order, and then the discussion that I heard from Mr. Hempling and some of the other witnesses and Mr. Figueroa on perhaps a process to agree on what is important and what really results in the outcomes that the commission would like to see. And I think that's more important than maybe how many trucks you have in service.
Gotcha. Understood. Thank you. Finally, we heard earlier that you agreed that there are a number of areas where it is possible to report specific quantified efficiencies to the extent they were achieved. Do you still agree with that?
Yes.
And are you aware of Luma performing these kinds of calculations or reporting in connection with this rate petition?
I am aware of all of the metrics that they report on a regular basis, the 594 that I had in my testimony. Are you asking about the metrics or the efficiencies?
The efficiencies quantification.
The only quantification that I've seen are in the annual reports that show the efficiencies that I believe that your colleague referenced as well.
Okay.
Along with some other achievements throughout the year that you can argue can lead to efficiencies as well.
I see. And this was posed as a rhetorical question earlier, but do you agree that quantifying and reporting specific efficiencies would increase transparency for ratepayers?
It could.
Do you agree that quantifying and reporting specific efficiencies would help the people of Puerto Rico understand whether Luma is achieving what it proposed to achieve when it bid on the O&M contract?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Do you agree that quantifying and reporting specific efficiencies would help the people of Puerto Rico understand whether Luma is achieving what it proposed to achieve when it bid on the O&M contract?
I would have to assume that the people of Puerto Rico know or knew what Luma proposed to achieve when it bid on it. However, if the commission would like to track any metric, providing that type of performance reporting requirements could achieve that.
Great. Thank you. That answered my last question as well.
Okay, I promised Mr. Maza that I would complete his questions for him, and I think I can boil all his remaining questions down to a specific question, Mr. Balbis, and then I have a very short area of my own. I mean, you should have gathered. One can gather from Mr. Maza's questions a skepticism about the present extent of quantification of efficiencies. Did you basically pick up that skepticism during the questioning?
I didn't.
Okay, you
characterize his questioning.
Skepticism. All right. Let's just put it this way. Do you have anything to add to what you've said? And believe me, I'm not asking you for a long novel, but do you have anything to add to what you've said in defense of Luma's present treatment of the quantification of efficiencies? Anything to add?
I think they've been consistent and clear in their position and looking for ways to provide information that provides value to the commission and customers.
Okay. I'm wondering whether you are aware, again, I'm not trying to trick you right now. I'm not sure I was trying to do that before either, but because you've been around the industry and have you observed any regulatory commission that you would consider to be practicing the state of the art in terms of getting its utility to quantify efficiencies? Is there anything that you can give us that we can learn from some other place?
Yeah, I think probably the longest standing example, and we've talked about it a lot, and that's demand side management programs. I think there are sophisticated ways that have been developed, tools, et cetera. That's probably the most one that's furthest along, been in place for decades.
And I think the message that comes from what you just said, and perhaps similar messages came from your two colleagues, is that the idea of quantifying efficiencies is best talked about in the context of a specific program or a specific effort that has boundaries and definitions and clear book costs associated with it and clear monitoring associated with it. Is that correct?
That's one example. I'd like to clarify my answer on state of the art. I did provide, even though it was enacted in, I believe, 1981, but the generation performance incentive factor, fuel cost, is typically one of the highest, if not the highest cost customers pay for. And improving the efficiency, the performance of a generating fleet, even a 2% reduction in fuel usage, it's a huge impact on customer bills. So that's another one. But back to your other question, which now I forgot.
Well, what I'm asking is this. Once again, it seems to me what I've learned today is that, among other things, what I've learned today is that a productive way to talk about efficiencies is to be specific about the program, to be specific about the desired outcome, to have metrics with respect to the outcome, to be clear on the costs associated with the effort, and to monitor throughout and make it program specific, as opposed to generically talking about efficiencies across the whole area like transmission or distribution. That's what I've learned today. Is that correct in your view?
That is the typical way that those programs are developed, in my experience.
Okay. Very briefly, because I know it's late, and this really doesn't relate to efficiencies, you have a discussion in your testimony, your original testimony, where you refer to something called the regulatory compact. Do you remember that?
Yes.
I've never seen a regulatory compact written down anywhere. Have you? That's a yes or a no. I'll give you a chance to elaborate.
Well, it is the subject of many books. I believe you had written a book that touches on it.
Yeah, but not necessarily positively.
So it is the subject of many documents, many writings, many white papers. Yes, but if there's a tome that's the regulatory compact that you lay your hand on, no, I haven't seen that.
I'm wondering, do you view the regulatory compact as a legal matter, or as a social matter, or as a matter among business friends? What is this compact that you're referring to? Is it legal?
The typical legal arguments are like Hope versus Bluefield and a number of others that really establish a lot of the parameters that are part of the regulatory compact. But the regulatory compact of its own, to my knowledge, isn't illegal.
It's not?
It's my understanding. There's not a Florida law or a U.S. law, other than a couple of the cases that I reference. But it is something that I used when I was in office, the concept of a regulatory compact to make decisions. But I'm not an attorney, I should say.
Right, I can see that. Let me see if I can cut to the chase. The regulator is bound by its statutes, yes?
Correct.
And it's bound by the Constitution's due process clause and the takings clause, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And when you talk about a regulatory compact as something that defines the legal relationship, by the way, is that what the compact does? It defines the legal relationship between the utility and its regulator? Is that what you mean by compact?
That's some of what I mean, yes.
Sorry?
Some of it, yes.
That's some of it?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's something about the compact that's addition to something that binds the regulator and its utility? Something else?
Well, let me restate what I stated. There's a regulatory compact piece of it, and then there's other items that I would take into account when making decisions.
Okay, well, I'm just talking about the compact. Is there anything that is compact besides the statute and the Constitution?
Again, I'm not an attorney.
Well, I'm trying to understand what you mean by the regulatory compact. What do you mean by it then? If it's not the legal relationship between the utility and its regulator, what is the compact then?
Well, it's stated in my testimony.
Yes? Okay, so it's no more than what's in your testimony.
Correct.
Does the regulatory compact include the government's ability to revoke the utility's right to serve and replace it with another utility? Is that part of the compact?
No, and I've had examples where we've done that.
It's not part of the regulatory compact.
I've had examples when I personally voted on actions such as that where service territories were changed for a number of reasons.
Right, but when you use the term regulatory compact, does this compact, which is, as I understand it, a statement of the legal relationship between the utility and its regulators, does it include the government's power or right to replace the utility with somebody else? Is that part of this big agreement that you call the compact?
Again, I'm not stating whether that is or is not. I'm just telling you that that has been done in the past, and since that was not challenged, I assume it didn't violate any legal, any state or federal law.
Because you don't mention in your definition of regulatory compact the government's opportunity to replace the utility for poor performance, correct? You don't mention that.
I do not.
Okay. Have you read, you cite Florida Power Commission versus Hope Natural Gas. Have you read the case?
Not recently, no.
Did you ever read it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. You say, quote, Hope asserts that the rates must be, quote, just and reasonable, close quote. Do you remember saying that?
I do.
Is that correct? Is that an accurate statement of what the case says?
Yes, that's what my understanding is.
Well, what's the source of the just and reasonable standard? Is it the Supreme Court decision?
In my case, it was the Florida statutes.
Right. It's a statute. It's not Hope Natural Gas, right?
Correct.
Okay. What are the elements of the regulatory compact in Puerto Rico? Besides the statute and the federal constitution, the state constitution, are there any other elements to the regulatory compact in Puerto Rico? Do you know?
Not to my knowledge.
What about the OMA? Is that part of the regulatory compact?
Again, I would assume that since it was enacted and agreed upon and no one challenged it for a legal basis and it still stands, then no.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Baldis. Again, I want to thank you for your service as a commissioner. I've worked with hundreds of commissioners over my lifetime, so I have a lot of respect for people who have put in that kind of work and with so little benefit other than having to work very hard. So congratulations on that and thank you. Redirect.
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Figueroa. Margarita Mercado for Luma. In cross-examination, you were asked about whether Luma could conduct a mathematical calculation regarding line losses. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you were trying to explain about limits on the accuracy of the calculation. Is my recollection accurate?
Yes.
Could you explain what you were trying to say?
Well, I will just restate what my colleague, Mr. Smith, mentioned, and the point of raising that is that the calculation is only as good as the information you put into the equation, and to the extent that we're trying to define whether certain levels of improvement in certain areas are being established, then you need to make sure that the quality of the information that's being fed into that calculation is accurate and represents the reality of the system. And I think that's an important element to keep in mind as we are thinking about the general progress of the system, the performance of Luma, and the quantification of whatever efficiencies the Bureau wants to quantify or wants to have Luma quantify, because otherwise then we are just putting numbers into pieces of paper without any real relationship to what is the reality of the system and the operations to date. I think there's a number of areas. Another example has to do with collection of bad debt. We know that there's a there's a lot of cleanup efforts that are being performed on our CCMB system that relates to being able to identify what the actual amounts of collectible receivables are, in which then you can base both your efforts to collect as well as your calculation of bad debt. That's just one example of other, but generally, critical financial system is another that my colleague Mr. Smith also mentioned earlier, and generally that's what I referenced by data.
Is there any other guidance or information that Luma would need from, for example, the regulator to be able to quantify efficiencies in particular performance areas?
Well, I think that's what we would need is really what it is that the Bureau is focused on and is particularly thinking about. What are the areas that they wish to focus on? And I think that's part of the conversation on what are areas that are mature enough to be able to have the be able to assess that efficiency over time. What is the starting point? What is the end point? How does it relate to performance? So I think it's part of a proceeding that hopefully the Bureau will commence, in which that can be further defined, and then when there's alignment on what can be reported on and to the extent to which that reporting can occur, then we can certainly go about collecting that information and reporting to the PREP.
Thank you. No more questions.
Well, thank you very much. 5:30, not bad. Congratulations, everybody. Thank you, panelists, for being here today. I'm going to do some housekeeping very briefly with my colleagues. You're welcome to leave quietly while we accomplish that task. Thank you very much. I'll see some of you tomorrow. Okay, let's quickly turn to housekeeping and get that job done. Everybody ready? Okay. You got everybody's attention? All right, let's get my notes in the right order. Okay, here is the plan for tomorrow. I think there's nothing new on this list. Any unfinished items from the November 24th budget panel? There are none. Zap. Okay, questions on the labor topic associated with the generation panel with Ms. Witacek and others. That has long been discussed, and that will occur tomorrow. Any desired follow-up on the new generation materials received from Genera last Thursday evening? Will we have questions on that? Mr. Brady.
Yes, for the record, Corey Brady, Weil, Gotcho, and Manji, speaking on behalf of the bondholder interveners. I've been discussing that with Genera's counsel, and as far as what we're calling the hopefulness document, we think it would make sense to cover that in federal funds. I understand Genera's witnesses will be available in that panel to address that document and may not be available tomorrow.
Okay. Would you kindly, if that the people don't mind, kindly send me an email to remind me of what you just said. Send that tonight so I can plug that into my schedule, my developing outline of the federal funds panel.
Yes, and then on the LTSAs, Genera has designated those as confidential and is still providing some further information about the Tesla LTSA. So I also discussed that with Genera's counsel, and we would propose moving that to a confidential session when all the materials are in.
Right. So you'll give me some anticipation of when that's going to be, because the longer we go, especially with 5 days a week, the more constraint we have. Ma'am, do you have a comment?
Yes, I believe we already have scheduled a confidential session. I think it's December 5th, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it doesn't have to be at that time, and it might not be, because that's a very long day.
That's fine. We can schedule some other time.
Yeah.
We thought it would be appropriate to put it with that session.
If we can, you want to close the, go in secret only so many times, but it would be at the end of the day of some day. Doesn't have to be that day, and frankly, that day is looking very full.
That's
okay,
fine.
so just give me some notice and we'll figure it out.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for that cooperation. Really, I've been very impressed and appreciative of the inter-utility and inter-council cooperation from as long as I've been working this case 13 months ago. So thank you for that. Questions, and Ms. Sanchez-Bras is going to be here tomorrow, correct, Council?
Yes, you will.
Okay, so I have in my notes here something, questions of Genera's CFO on whether there was some risk of paying twice associated with inventory.
That's
Any
correct.
memory what I'm talking about?
Yes, she
Okay.
does, and she'll be ready to answer.
All right, beautiful. And then we have questions on retail wheeling for Mr. Burgermeister, but he is here only between 2 and 5, correct? Still?
Yeah, that is the plan.
Well, is he available in the morning?
Well, I've been back and
remotely.
forth with him for different hours, so I can ask him. I haven't asked him today.
Okay, it's a half-hour line of questions from my understanding from Ms. Courtney Lane.
Okay.
And I imagine there could be 10 or 20 minutes of cross on it and maybe 5 minutes from you. So he could be, it could be an hour, but if he's available in the morning, that might give the people the afternoon off.
I will check with him.
Yeah,
Send an email.
You do the best you can.
I don't know if we have someone from Luma can help me, but yeah, I'll
Okay.
do it.
And then there's, sorry?
No, someone from Luma is verifying.
All right. Then the other plan for the day was to discuss the council questions, which I sent out, I think, on Saturday. They're quite lengthy. We could spend a whole day on them. Nobody here wants to. You're all so helpful, but I don't know when else we would do that. And so let me ask your opinion. We're all working together here. I'm not going to dictate something, but I would find it productive to spend. We're going to be here tomorrow morning. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, study up on some of the questions. All right, be prepared to discuss some of them, and we'll learn what we can learn, and we'll get to lunchtime and see where we stand. Okay, we are coming in for at least the first half of the day. Can you all live with that? What? Go ahead, Council, Ms. Vasquez. What?
Yeah, I talked with both PREPA's council and Luma's council. I think it's something we would prefer to do some briefing on before.
Right. You're probably right. Because
you're putting on a difficult place, right? Because we're maybe going to elicit some testimony that it's more policy than actual legal.
All right. The basic point is we're going to get higher value per dollar if we give everybody time to think about it. Okay. All right.
Yes, and the bondholders would join NERA in that. We think we could do it in post-hearing briefing or virtual conference after the evidentiary hearing.
Well, thank you. We're here making decisions together, so thank you for that. Don't look relieved. I was going to ask your opinion anyway. It's not like you want a battle, okay? Sir. No, all I'm saying right now is we're not going to do it tomorrow. Okay, I am interested in doing it orally at some point, but the fact is I'm looking at 7 days a week studying on other matters also. So I don't know how well I would be prepared to ask my very friendly questions. So we're just going to have to see how it goes. Okay, Mr. Poe, it's Mr. Poe, right? Sir? Okay. We just want to get the highest value. All right. All right. Hold on. You okay, Mr. You okay over there, Mr. Napoli? Yeah. All right. Before I forget, so hold on, let's go back to tomorrow for a second. Let's just be honest with each other. Because if all we're talking about tomorrow is a half hour to an hour on questions on labor, and a half hour to an hour on retail wheeling. Now, here's my attitude. It's really hard to lose 2 hours. So I'd rather have you come in and we do the 2 hours and then people can celebrate going home early. Is everybody okay with that? Because I don't want to get to December 19th and have somebody say, I need 2 more hours. Everybody okay? All right, everybody happy now? Okay, one last point. So I had the misfortune of looking at the list of documents listed for administrative notice, all 73 of them. No, I didn't look at all 73. I look at the list of all 73. And I began to think back on the little that I can remember from administrative law in 1981 about administrative notice. And I wonder whether anybody carefully studied the doctrine of administrative notice before they started piling on those documents. And I began to think that maybe people had not. So this is what I'm going to do between now and tomorrow. I'm going to do some of my own research on administrative notice, and I'm going to come back with a general assessment of that list. And I may ask everybody to go back and look at that list, applying the proper criteria and winnow it down. But I'm not ready to do that yet. But I think there may have been a misunderstanding of what that is. Administrative notice and judicial notice is when you ask the tribunal to accept as a fact something that is almost impossible to disagree with. And I looked at the list and I already said you don't have to put past decisions on it. And I'm seeing pleadings, I'm seeing decisions. I'm not even seeing that Don Larson pitched the only World Series perfect game on the day I was born. Okay, which is not a fact that you can disagree with. And I'm just wondering whether we need to rethink that. So I'll come back with some thoughts on that tomorrow. Ms. Mercado, something?
Yeah, Margarita for Luma. We are working on a motion posting several of the documents, so we expect to file it tomorrow.
I'm trying to save people work, Ms. Mercado.
We already did it because the deadline was tomorrow, but it's almost ready. It's waiting for my final review.
Does your document have criteria for the proper for the criteria of what constitutes administrative notice, Ms. Mercado?
Applicable law in the Puerto Rico, yes.
Yeah. Well, you want to send me a draft tonight so I don't have to do my own study? No. Okay. When are you going to send this?
Well, as soon as I review it tonight, we'll file it. So tomorrow morning.
Well, if there's a view version of it tonight that's ready for publication, send it around everybody so I can read it early in the morning when I come in. It might save me some time. You follow? Yes. Okay. Everybody smile. Everything okay? Anything from the commissioners? Okay. Thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow, 9 a.m.
Thank you.
Mr. Hempling, I would like to request something. And is that?
Was adjourning? Yes, ma'am.
It's circulate, or your team could circulate a revised calendar of the hearings just to make sure that, because some hearings have been moved, that we're all on the same page and that we're not confusing any hearing date.
Oh, well, no, ma'am. The 1 second, everybody. The spreadsheet, there has been no change in the panel by panel schedule of the 13 panels in at least a week. Okay, I'll be happy to send it around tonight. Okay, but there has been no change in the panels. What there has been, as you would have seen from the panel agendas document that I sent around this morning and redlined, is that there have been some minor topics moved from one panel to another to accommodate various schedules. But the panel schedule itself has not changed since, I think, November, whatever the date is on the latest version. Sorry? Yeah, I'll send it around tonight to everybody, Ms. And I would never go a day without resending a panel schedule change. Okay? Okay. You okay with that? Yeah. All right. And then we are adjourned, and thank you very much.